I still remember the sound of my heart thumping in my chest, a primal rhythm interrupted only by the low hum of chatter from the family gathering. Christmas had always been a chaotic blend of laughter and light amidst the stress of looming responsibilities. But this year felt different, it felt heavy. My Uncle Harold was the center of attention, regaling everyone with elaborate tales of his upcoming surprise vacation to the Maldives for his daughter's Christmas gift, a trip that might as well have been a vacation of the gods. A sun-soaked getaway, oceans kissed by golden rays, while I sat a mere 10 feet away, feeling the tightening knot of resentment coiling in my stomach, the air thick with something bitter and unspoken. Just a few months back, he had borrowed $700 from me, promising to pay it back by summer, but summer had turned to fall and was now fading into winter, and here he was, talking about flopping on a beach while I was left holding the weight of unpaid debts and dwindling savings. The world outside the window streaked with winter sleet seemed a stark contrast to the sun-drenched life he was about to embark upon. I hadn't begrudged him his joy, but as he continued to expound on the grandeur of this vacation, my fingers involuntarily clenched around my glass, my knuckles turning white. I could feel the warmth of the room, the lights twinkling merrily above us, while my thoughts swirled with unease and doubt. Was I being unreasonable? Was it wrong to feel this way about family? They say money and family don't mix, and yet here I was, struggling to reconcile my love for my family with the hurt of when it felt like we were no longer on the same playing field. With every laugh and cheer from the gathered relatives, I felt the walls closing in around me, pressing on my chest until I could hardly breathe. I thought about his daughter, how this vacation would be something magical for her, a memory that would last a lifetime. But that didn't change the fact that I needed that money, too: bills, groceries, a pair of shoes that didn't have a hole worn through the sole. And then something snapped inside me, birthed from a mix of frustration and desperation. My voice broke the laughter like a sudden winter chill cutting through warm air, and I caught everyone's attention, all faces looking towards me. "Harold, can we talk about that loan?" The room fell quiet, the joyful energy draining from my words as the focus shifted from dreams of sun-soaked bliss to the heavy topic of debt. Harold looked taken aback, his expression shifting from jovial to defensive, his boastful demeanor deflating like an untied balloon. "What are you talking about?" he replied, the twinkle in his eye replaced by something darker. I could feel the weight of my words, like stones thrown into a placid lake, rippling out to the circles of family surrounding us. "The $700 you borrowed? I really need it back." There was an awkward silence, filled with muffled gasps and glances exchanged between family members, their expressions a mix of shock and, I could swear, a hint of contempt. I'd broken an unspoken convention, drawn back the curtain that shielded our family's fragile dynamics. Harold bristled, his pride wounded yet hidden behind a facade of casual irritation. "Come on, you know I'm good for it," he replied, the bravado slipping back into his tone. "This trip is for Sarah, don't make this about money now." But it was all about the money I had graciously lent him in confidence, thinking I'd be repaid before the year turned another page. I saw the embarrassment flicker in his eyes, fleeting yet sharp. I pressed on, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "I shouldn't have to feel guilty for needing what's already mine. I saved up for ages to lend it to you." The conversation dwindled into muffled complaints from Harold and whispers from the other relatives. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, unable to look away as the anger simmered beneath the surface. It felt excruciating yet liberating to have put it out there, a gaping wound laid bare that couldn't be sewn shut. In that moment, I realized the cost wasn't just material, it struck at the very heart of familial trust, turning us both into strangers fighting for something that had once been given freely. The evening wore on, and Harold eventually retreated from the conversation, a shadowy figure reclaiming the spotlight with half-hearted laughter. But I had crossed a threshold, and though the breadcrumbs of resentment might linger, I felt a strange lightness, an acknowledgement of my own needs amid the familial chaos. The unease didn't dissolve entirely, but I found peace in confronting the truth, and I experienced the beginnings of guilt dissipating, leaving space for clarity in its wake. A few days post-Christmas, I received a text from my uncle, a simple "Hey, let's get together, I'd like to clear the air." He'd agreed to pay me back in installments, starting with the first next week. I felt a rush of mixed emotions as I read the message. Relief washed over me, yes, but with it came a creeping wish that things didn't have to be difficult, ignited by the knowledge that confronting him had altered our relationship forever, shifting some foundational floorboards that would never return to their original status. I realized then, processing this new ground we stood upon, that sometimes, families could only rediscover themselves through honesty, grimy and raw as it may feel, but worth the discomfort for the sake of healing. As the weeks progressed, I found myself caught in a curious limbo. Each time my phone pinged with a message, my heart fluttered with a mix of anticipation and anxiety, anticipation for a glimpse of the man I'd once called my uncle and anxiety about what each check-in would herald. His first payment arrived promptly the following Friday. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope that bore my name, the familiar handwriting inside. It felt strange, like crossing forbidden ground, as if opening that envelope would further peel away the layers of our relationship, revealing the raw truth beneath. The moment I pulled out the check, a wave of relief surged through me, quickly followed by an echoing reminder of his promises. The feeling was bittersweet. I was grateful for the money, of course, but I couldn't shake the heaviness in my heart. That Sunday, family dinner rolled around, and with it came a palpable tension gnawing at the corners of my mind. We gathered in my parents' living room, the air thick with the scent of my mom's famous roast. Laughter bubbled up around the room as my relatives exchanged jovial stories, their raucousness contrasting sharply with my internal struggle. I could see my uncle from across the room, dapper in a sharp suit that made him look 10 years younger than his age. He was animatedly sharing plans for the trip to the Maldives, his daughter perched atop the arm of the couch, her excitement radiating. She beamed with pride, blissfully unaware of the cautious glances exchanged between her older cousins and me. Each vivid detail he described felt like a dagger to my gut. The sun-drenched beaches, the luxurious villa, the words dripped with privilege while the reality of his debt loomed heavy behind them. I swallowed hard, recalling our conversation from a few weeks back, the discomfort we'd navigated, and the truth I had dared to share. Eventually, I caught my uncle's eye. His expression shifted instantly. Gone was the carefree demeanor he wore when speaking of the Maldives. Instead, it was replaced with something akin to shame, or perhaps just a flicker of guilt. I hesitated, wondering if I should follow through with this newfound understanding between us, or allow silence to wrap around us like a thick fog. But as the evening wore on, the bravado in his words became harder to listen to. The laughter felt hollow. I clenched my jaw, trying to focus on a game of charades unfolding nearby, but inside, I was seething, a simmering pot about to boil over. Then, as if on cue, the family buzzed around, exchanging placid nods, all oblivious to the storm swirling in my mind. I stood up abruptly, meeting him halfway across the room, and as I did, time felt suspended. I couldn't fully articulate what drove me to speak, but the warmth of his laughter abruptly halted as I reached him. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above the restaurant chatter that reverberated around us. His face paled slightly as he glanced over at my parents, then nodded stiffly. We stepped into the adjacent kitchen, the cacophony of family momentarily muffled behind the door. "About the Maldives," I started, carefully measuring my words, "it's just..." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to be honest. "I don't understand how you can afford that when you owe me $700. There was a pregnant pause, and I could feel the air thickening between us. His eyes flickered with indignation before his shoulders slumped, exhaustion crumpling his facade. "You're right," he breathed, running a hand through his hair. The honesty in his tone caught me by surprise, a raw admission that echoed back through the familial halls we wandered. In that space, I sensed the weight of secrecy being lifted, if only slightly. As we stood there, the conversation slowly unwound, the debts, the choices he'd made, the regrets he wished he could reclaim. I saw him, not as my uncle who flaunted his apparent wealth, but as a flawed man grappling with his own decisions, navigating the murky waters of his life just as I was navigating mine. Both of us had been on different paths, yet somehow, we arrived at the same crossroads. It was hauntingly familiar. When we exited the kitchen, I felt lighter, as if the dark clouds surrounding us had drifted apart even just a little. In the weeks that followed, my uncle resumed his payments, each one a silent promise that allowed us to rebuild an invisible bridge that spanned the chasm between us. Conversations became more open, and laughter wasn't forced anymore. It returned, gradually, restoring warmth to our gatherings. Eventually, he began to involve me in his plans, allowing me to express my dreams of traveling, not to the Maldives, but to places I yearned to see, and I recognized the transformation. I understood deeply now that confronting the hard truths had not obliterated our relationship, rather, it had reformed its very foundation. As Christmas approached, I found myself wondering more and more about the nature of family, the enduring bonds that tied us to one another, for better and for worse. Something closer to understanding blossomed. Perhaps, in our raw exchanges, we were somehow rediscovering the essence of connection, imperfect yet precious. Then, one cold winter evening, as snow blanketed the streets outside and the warmth of the season settled in our home, I received another tantalizing message from him, one that reads simply, "Let's plan a family trip together next year, somewhere we can all go." It felt like an invitation to venture forth into unknown territory, and to that, I found myself wholeheartedly saying yes, feeling the comfort of adventure awaiting us, perhaps captured in the warmth of honesty instead of the weight of pretense. As I read his message, a rush of excitement coursed through me, merging with the ghosts of my earlier uncertainty. The thought of a family trip was exhilarating, like the first breath of fresh air after being inside on a stuffy day. I imagined us laughing together, making new memories, and perhaps even healing some of the rifts that had widened in our conversations. I envisioned sandy beaches and lush landscapes, places where we could leave behind the heaviness of family dynamics and indulge in pure joy, if only for a while. Nestled in the corner of my living room, with the faint smell of pine wafting from our modest Christmas tree, I couldn't suppress a smile. My heart swelled at the thought of reconciliation, of letting go of past grievances and embracing what lay ahead. In the following days leading up to the holidays, our conversations took on a newfound lightness. He opened up about his life in ways I hadn't expected, his struggles at work and the weight of being the family's financial provider. It felt surreal, sharing laughter about his daughter's seemingly endless wish list while in his shadow lay the burden of the previous debts and disappointments we had navigated. I caught myself thinking about how daunting the prospect of taking my family on a shared journey had once seemed, overshadowed by prior confrontations. Yet, here we were, mapping out a future that sparkled with possibilities. As we began planning the trip, each message exchanged felt like stitches weaving the fabric of our connection tighter. We explored myriad destinations, from tropical paradises to mountain retreats. My uncle's daughter chimed in with her ideas, and so too did my siblings, each contributing their wishes and hopes for this journey. There was something wonderfully liberating about immersing ourselves in a collective dream, a shared experience that bound us together through laughter and imagination rather than the weight of expectation or disappointment. The past, with all its burdens, faded into the background for those fleeting moments, and the prospect of adventure glimmered ahead like glistening snow under the winter sun. However, as the planning intensified, I found myself grappling with another wave of emotions. The shadow of my uncle's debt lingered in the back of my mind, creeping in like a winter chill despite the warmth of our newfound camaraderie. Would I be able to fully embrace this trip, carefree and lighthearted, knowing he still owed me? A part of me wanted to push the thought aside, to submerge the nagging feeling in a tidal wave of optimism, while another urged me to confront this lingering discomfort. I reasoned with myself that perhaps this is what forgiveness looked like, the conscious choice to move forward despite unresolved tensions, to embrace joy while still holding space for the healing that needed to occur. The weeks rolled on, and soon enough, the trip was finalized. We had settled on a tropical island with golden beaches and azure waters. As Christmas approached, I felt more connected with my family than I had in years, every message imbued with the fragility and strength of our shared journey. But the night before our departure, while bustling to pack, an unexpected reminder hit me when I stumbled across a handwritten note my uncle had sent long ago, the one where he'd promised to repay the debt. It was a small piece of paper with irregular handwriting, like a phantom drifting through my memories, a promise made during a time when things felt lighter, when the looming shadow of financial stress hadn't yet clouded our interactions. In that moment, all my emotional progress felt attacked. Conflicted by the weight of my own conscience, I decided to send him a simple text, an olive branch submerged in vulnerability. "I'm genuinely excited for the trip, but I can't shake the feeling about the debt." He replied instantly, "Let's discuss it when we're away. I want to enjoy this break with you." Deep down, I appreciated his resolve to prioritize positivity over doubt, yet the flicker of unease within me charged the air like static electricity. As we arrived at the island, every moment was filled with laughter and light, the seashells sharp against our footprints in the sand. My uncle appeared to be genuinely enjoying precious time with his daughter, capturing memories in photographs that would surely warm our hearts in years to come, while I felt the shift within myself, an acceptance of the messiness of family. Yet, the acknowledgement of debts unresolved lingered, almost like a character in its own right, standing just outside the joyous frame of our vacation. I realized then how complicated it is to straddle the line between past pain and present joy, between memories that bind us and those that wound us. On the last evening of our trip, as the sun sank beneath the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and lavender, I knew I had to confront my uncle once more, my heart heavy but resolution firm. We strolled along the beach, the waves caressing our ankles, making the moment feel surreal. As the sky faded to twilight, I turned to him, prepared for the delicate balance of honesty and hope I had carried from home. "It's been an incredible trip, but we need to talk about some things when we return," I began, "about the debt. I want us both to feel free moving forward." He looked at me, eyes reflecting the fading sun, and sighed warmly as he nodded, granting me a sense of relief as the uncertain weight began to lift. Reflecting on it, I realized there might never be a perfect time to confront issues that cling to family dynamics like sea salt in air, and while the elements of debt still hung, our shared joy illuminated so much more. In vulnerability lies freedom. Sometimes, that's where the trips of a lifetime begin. When I received the news that my older sister, Claire, had to move back in with our parents, something deep inside me told me that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't fathom at the moment. I'm Emma, the youngest of three, and my relationship with Claire has always been a rocky one. Sure, we had shared laughter and tears growing up, but there was something about her larger-than-life persona that often overshadowed my quieter, more reserved disposition. I had built a life for myself, a snug little apartment in the heart of the city with a decent job that allowed me to pay my bills while still enjoying a few luxuries here and there. So when my parents called with concern edging their voices, explaining that Claire had been laid off and needed a place to stay temporarily, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. They explained how Claire would contribute financially to the household, which seemed reasonable on the surface, but as the weeks passed, it became disappointingly clear that this was not going to be a temporary arrangement. The first indication of the shift came one afternoon when I casually visited my parents. Walking through the familiar doorway, I was immediately engulfed in a whirl of mismatched furniture and the uniquely cluttered chaos of their living room. It felt different now. Claire had rearranged the space, filling it with scattered boxes, remnants of her previous life. She greeted me with the same beaming smile, but I could sense an underlying tension, a whisper of irritation hanging in the air like an uninvited guest. We exchanged pleasantries that felt stilted and awkward, and it quickly became apparent that her presence was overshadowing mine. It didn't take long for her to bring up the topic of finances, how my parents were struggling to keep up with their mortgage payments while trying to help her get back on her feet. It was a tough conversation that had me feeling cornered, like they expected me to take action. I found myself drowning in guilt, torn between helping my family and maintaining my own sense of independence. They mentioned how my contribution to the mortgage would ease their burdens and allow Claire more time to get a new job, framing it as a family obligation that I simply couldn't escape. After all, right? Family sticks together. The idea of throwing money their way felt like a no-brainer, but I couldn't help but wonder if Claire would truly be grateful or if she would instead see it as another opportunity to lean on me while I struggled to maintain my budding career. I mulled over it for days, and with each passing moment, the thought of participating in this financial strain more than I had anticipated grew heavier. It wasn't just my money at stake, it was my mental space, my comfort, and my sense of security that was being tested. As the weeks turned to months, the stress festered. A particularly low evening found me swirling through the darkness of my mind, battling with the anxiety of homeownership versus my sense of familial duty. Claire continued to thrive in the chaotic comfort of our parents' home, her laughter echoing through the walls while I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment, feeling the distance grow. I pondered my worth in our family dynamic and felt torn between my urge to support them and my instinct to protect my own growing future. When confrontation finally loomed, it exploded into one dramatic night over a family dinner where we sat across the table, Claire alight with engaging stories from her day while I quietly picked at the cold pasta on my plate. In a moment of frustration, I voiced my feelings about not wanting to pay the mortgage. The air turned electric, and for the first time, Claire's mask slipped slightly, revealing a flicker of genuine indignation. "It's not just my responsibility," I asserted, a shaky confidence underlined by the crack in my voice. She was taken aback, and for a moment, I wondered if I had finally clarified my stance, but instead, all hell broke loose. I witnessed an explosion of accusations hurled between Claire and me, sharp words clattering like glass breaking. My parents, caught in the crossfire, tried to mediate, but I felt less like a daughter and more like a burden. Heat rose in my chest as Claire accused me of selfishness, while I voiced my feelings of unappreciation and betrayal. It was a raw, painful argument, and when it finally fizzled out, I couldn't shake off the suffocating realization that I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the way things were, or if I wanted to. I excused myself that night, feeling more isolated than ever, and upon returning to my apartment, I fell into a deep, restless sleep, punctuated with dreams of family betrayals and financial obligations that loomed over me like dark clouds. Days blended into weeks until I finally decided to distance myself from the toxic cycle of guilt and anger. I started to think critically about my own wants and needs. I drafted a letter to my parents, outlining my decision not to contribute to the mortgage, hoping it would provide clarity for all of us. It was written with intense love, filled with the emotional depth of someone who desperately wanted to reconnect but felt trapped by the dynamic set years ago. I explained that I loved them all dearly, but I could no longer sacrifice my own stability for their peace. The letters found their way to my parents, and although the response wasn't immediately warm, my parents at least acknowledged my courage to stand my ground. Claire, however, took it harder than I expected. Her phone call that followed was rife with anger and misunderstanding, yet I felt something shift. Instead of clashing, I allowed her to express herself while I calmly responded, and to my surprise, her tone softened. Weeks turned to months. Though our relationship didn't magically mend, it did begin to evolve towards something more honest. Claire ultimately found a new job that stabilized her income, and while it took time, we began to rebuild the bridge our family needed. I learned that sometimes, a stand for myself did not stem from selfishness but from a place of deep self-respect. That unanticipated reflection taught me the art of balance, how love can coexist with boundaries. And while the discussion of finances still hung in the air like a specter, our family unit began to resonate with a different tone, a more supportive, understanding one. I shared this story with a friend as we laughed about the ridiculousness of our familial dynamics. And the strangest thing happened. Claire popped into my thoughts, reminding me that, sometimes, the way you navigate conflict can redefine relationships, even if it feels contentious at first. As I lay in bed that night, the shadows of previous conflicts melted into the hush of my room, and I reveled in the soft glow of acceptance I felt. Maybe, in facing the storm together, we had each become stronger, more resilient. I would continue to carve my own path and embrace the complexity of love with boundaries, wrapped in the possibility of new beginnings and stronger ties. So, was I the asshole? Maybe, for a moment, but that moment helped safeguard my heart and nurture a family connection that was worth every ounce of struggle. As days turned into weeks, the dynamics at home shifted like the ebb and flow of the ocean tides, and I could feel the undertow of change swirling around me. My sister's presence had transformed the atmosphere. The house was no longer just a shell echoing with silent resentments and unspoken words but was now filled with laughter, late-night conversations, and the occasional argument over whose turn it was to take out the trash. I caught myself glancing at her when I thought she wasn't watching, noticing the way she'd laugh at her own silly jokes or how her eyes would shimmer when she spoke about her work. I felt a flicker of warmth, the kind I hadn't allowed myself to embrace in years. I wondered if this was the unfamiliar sound of healing, an orchestra assembling after decades of discordant notes, each of us tentatively racing our instruments to join the symphony. Yet, beneath this newly woven tapestry lay a knot of tension that refused to loosen. The impending reality of our parents' financial situation loomed over us like dark clouds on the horizon. They had worked tirelessly to keep a roof over our heads, sacrificing much for a sense of security that now seemed delicate. I couldn't shake off the guilt swirling in my gut, an insistent reminder that my own independence had inadvertently contributed to the distance growing between my family and our responsibilities. We were all learning to navigate these choppy waters together, bound by a shared sense of duty, but the question echoed in my mind, was I responsible for saving us from drowning? One crisp autumn evening, as the sun began to dip below the trees, painting the sky in rich oranges and purples, I took a walk to gather my thoughts. I needed clarity. I found myself wandering to the coffee shop down the street, a cozy little place filled with the aroma of freshly brewed beans and the soft hum of conversations that somehow made my worries feel lighter. As I sipped my cappuccino, I overheard a couple discussing their struggles with family dynamics, and it struck me how universal our experiences were. That was when I realized I wasn't alone, that this shared pain, this negotiation of love and obligation, resonated beyond the walls of our family. When I returned home, a darkness was hanging in the air. My parents had decided to have the talk about their mortgage again. As they gathered us around the dining room table, I could see the worry etched into their faces, lines deepening like cracks in a porcelain vase, beautiful but fragile. They explained how the financial burden had grown heavier since my sister had moved in, how they had hoped the extra help would ease their situation but instead it felt like an anchor dragging us all down. I could feel my heart racing, the old defenses rising up like walls starting to thicken around me again. I didn't want to fight, I wanted to connect, but the words seemed to stick in my throat. Finally, I spoke up, my voice steady but soft. What if we came together to plan this out? I want to help. The room fell silent, each of us in our thoughts, the tension a thick, almost tangible fog. My sister's eyes lit up, and for a moment, the lightness from the coffee shop danced back into the room. We frantically brainstormed ideas, pooling resources like a patchwork quilt, slowly stitching together something new. It was in that moment that I felt a compelling shift, a sturdy thread, woven through the fabric of our relationships, an undeniable connection that reminded us we were all part of the same tapestry. As the weeks passed, we fine-tuned our household budget, and while some days were harder than others, we managed to claw back the control that had slipped from our fingers. The burden didn't evaporate, but sharing it made it bearable. The night before my parents were set to meet with their mortgage lender, I found myself curled up with my sister on the couch, a bowl of popcorn between us while we binge-watched our favorite show. The laughter flowed between us, and for the first time in so long, I felt free, unconfined by our past but tethered to something new and beautiful. When morning came, as the birds chirped their daily greetings, I caught an early glimpse of my parents, standing tall against the dawn, ready to face the day. They seemed more resolute, the worry less visible as they exchanged quiet words. I knew we had moved past the point of being the assholes. We hadn't just weathered the storm, we had learned to dance in the rain, to let the drops wash away our fears, and we emerged, messy, imperfect, but undeniably united. Looking back, I realized that my initial reluctance to pay the mortgage had stemmed from a place of self-preservation and misunderstanding, but it quietly evolved into an opportunity for growth. In acknowledging my boundaries, I learned the importance of balance and the strength of family, and that love isn't just about sacrifice, it's about sharing, supporting, and ultimately embracing the complex layers that knit us together. So, was I the asshole? Not anymore. Just a person learning to navigate the beautiful chaos of family ties, tangled yet stronger for the journey we shared. As for an update, life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. A couple of months later, my parents expressed their gratitude. Our collective efforts had eased their burden, and they even started discussing investments in their favorite hobbies again. My sister and I grew closer, sharing our lives, guiding one another, and at times, still butting heads. Yet, each argument only served as an avenue for growth, a chapter added to our story. I think, in the quiet moments of reflection, that's the beauty of family. It's messy, sometimes frustrating, but amidst all that chaos, we often find our way back to each other. And really, isn't that what matters most? As I settled into this new rhythm of life, I noticed how the air felt different in our home. It was lighter, infused with the sense of camaraderie that had blossomed between my sister and me. On weekends, our kitchen filled with the sense of baking bread and simmering sauces, an orchestra of sound as we attempted new recipes together. But it wasn't all flour and laughter, the undercurrents of tension could still surface. I remember one particularly rainy Saturday afternoon when the sky mirrored our mood. I had returned home after a long week of work, exhausted and craving solitude. Instead, I found my sister hosting an impromptu gathering of her friends. The din of youthful laughter and music pulsed through the house, and I felt my heart thrum uneasily in my chest. I was torn between the discomfort of intrusion and the warmth of familial support in their laughter, which echoed off the walls like constant reminders of choices I didn't quite understand. Concealed within the whirlwind of my thoughts was the nagging feeling that the strides we had made had somehow become entangled with my sister's demands. As the chaos of her life spilled into our shared space, I found myself feeling suffocated by the very familial bond I had craved. When I finally mustered the courage to address it, my sister, caught off guard, was defensive. "You used to be so welcoming," she challenged, and I could sense the shadows of our past struggles creeping in. Inherently, this was a moment of vulnerability for both of us, and as the silence hung heavy before me, I realized it wasn't just about me needing space, it was also about her needing to assert her independence in this shared space. After what felt like an eternity of misunderstanding, we sat down, nursing cups of tea, the clamor of her friends fading into the background. I spoke my truth, gentle yet firm. "I love having you here, but I need a little room to breathe sometimes." I watched as her expression softened, the realization dawning on her like the morning sun breaking through the clouds. "I get it," she finally said, her voice laced with empathy. "I'm still figuring this out too." From there, we laid the groundwork for a new kind of understanding, one that delicately balanced my need for tranquility with her vibrant, chaotic energy. We established times for her gatherings, leaving pockets of silence for both introspection and connection. As months slipped by like the autumn leaves falling gently from the trees outside, our family dynamic eased into a rhythm that felt right. With the festive season approaching, my parents decided to host a holiday dinner, hoping to gather everyone, both a celebration of the many transformations we had weathered and a nod to the community we had formed. We'd always traded off holidays with each other, but this year felt different. It pulsed with undercurrents of genuine appreciation. As the table filled with food and laughter, I observed the way my sister's friends mingled effortlessly with our family, an intertwined tapestry of relationships. Each conversation brought forth stories, inherited laughter, the kind born from shared histories and new experiences alike. But amidst the joy, I saw the familiar glint of tension creeping into the room as my parents expressed worry over their lingering mortgage, a detail I had hoped to keep under wraps. My sister, well-intentioned yet impulsive, enthusiastically shared ideas for a crowdfunding initiative to help with expenses. The way my parents glimmers with confused hesitation only added weight to the conversation. I felt the room pulse with apprehension as layers of unspoken concern layered themselves upon my heart. Stepping in, I breathed deeply, drawing from the wisdom that had built itself over months of navigating rough waters together. "Let's talk this through as a family," I suggested, knowing we could find common ground. We always had. The discussion that followed was cathartic and revealing, each family member presenting their views, fears woven seamlessly into a tapestry of resolution. Finally, we reached an understanding that eased all our hearts, an agreement to pool resources into a family fund that would alleviate some stress while allowing my parents to invest in their passions. It opened the door to a more significant discussion about finances, futures, and the shared desire to support one another. Sitting around that holiday table, the glows of fairy lights expertly littering the room flickered, mirroring the warmth in our hearts. I understood, in that moment, reassurance and growth can coexist, just as laughter and arguments can. Our journey had only begun to blossom, intricate and beautiful, revealing itself as we paid attention and cared for one another, an ever-evolving chapter filled with love. It was a moment of profound truth for me. Maybe, in allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and honest, in navigating the messy underbelly of family life, we had built something sturdier than any foundation of separate lives. We had stitched a quilt of resilience, forever learning, forever growing, bound not by blood, but by our commitment to each other. I thought family dinners were supposed to be a happy time, a sanctuary where laughter echoed against the walls and stories were shared over hearty meals. But for us, those evenings had morphed into something altogether different, shadows lurking at the edges of our conversations, wrapping our interactions in unspoken tension. My name is Clara, and I've been married to Tom for 6 years. We have a 5-year-old daughter named Ruby, and while I consider ourselves a loving family, it has become impossible to ignore the growing chasm between Tom's parenting style and my own. I often found myself biting my tongue as I watched him joke with Ruby, unraveling crucial lessons about respect and boundaries into playful exchanges that sometimes skirted a little too close to mockery for my liking. I remember feeling that knot in my stomach every time I saw Tom dismiss her feelings, like the time she fell off her new bike and cried, only for him to ruffle her hair, laughing, saying she was being drama queen. It was that laughter that made me feel like I was caught in some kind of silent storm. Did he really believe it was all a joke? Surely, parenting requires more than a punchline. After months of internal wrestling, trying to bridge our views, I decided, after a particularly difficult week where it felt like every interaction we had ignited a small brushfire between us, that it was time to have an intervention, but one that wouldn't involve an audience. My plan was simple: gather a few close family members who shared my concerns and sit Tom down. The day of the intervention, my heart raced. We hosted the dinner in our cozy living room, filled with the familiar scent of my grandmother's lasagna wafting through the air, an ambrosial comfort I hoped would alleviate the tension. I watched him as he entered, a radiant smile on his face and an easy banter with Ruby. For a fleeting moment, I almost doubted my decision. How would he react to these loved ones sitting there, ominously quiet, gauging his every word? The evening began with laughter and light fare. But I could sense the shift when I introduced the topic with tentatively kind words about how much we all loved Ruby and wanted the best for her. Tom's smile flickered. I was met with a defensive posture, and soon, my family felt the air change as they echoed my concerns. "Tom, we've all noticed that sometimes you just brush off her feelings." Each word felt like a landed blow, and I could see his expression shifting from taken aback to outright hurt. As voices intensified, I could feel the thick cloud of resentment settling between us, swirling in my gut. I'd never meant for it to feel like an attack. It should have felt like a caring moment, but watching Tom's eyes narrow, his lips tighten, I wished I could erase the entire evening. What had I done? The room grew quiet, the sound of my own heart pounding dangerously loud in my ears. I could see Tom blinking back something, anger, sadness, or perhaps confusion. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor like nails on a chalkboard, and headed out to the patio. I followed, a mix of dread and regret crashing over me. Was I being an asshole? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He stood against the railing, the moonlight casting a soft glow on his profile. I just want to be a fun dad, Clara, he said, his tone flat but revealing a deeper vulnerability. I didn't know there was a right way to parent. With that, I plunged into an honest dialogue instead of confrontation, revealing my fears of Ruby growing up leniently, of becoming someone who couldn't respect boundaries. As the night unfurled, we both found ourselves sharing more than just grievances. We uncovered fears, doubts we'd both carried throughout our marriage. I think it was then that a shift occurred, allowing us to reach homemade understandings of what it meant to raise our little girl. By the time midnight rolled around and the stars twinkled like distant lanterns overhead, we had come to an agreement. Tom promised to be more mindful of Ruby's feelings, while I vowed to ensure my approach balanced firmness and compassion. There were tears, hugs, and an ache that transformed into quiet laughter, dispelling the earlier tension. Weeks later, we saw noticeable change, not just in Tom's interactions with Ruby, but in how we communicated overall. It wasn't perfect and won't ever be, but now we could openly discuss boundaries, emotions, and even the occasional disagreement, something I'd craved since the beginning. I remember laying in bed that night, watching Tom lose himself in his dreams, not having resolved everything but feeling as if the weight of our misunderstanding had shifted, loosening its grip. It was a step forward, and though we still navigated the stormy seas of parenthood, the conversation gave me hope. As I write this, narrating the poignant moments that brought us closer, I can't help but wonder how many couples sit with their own trepidations beneath familiar stars, all needing just a little intervention of their own to make love thrive amid the chaos. Yet, despite the tentative peace we found in the quiet of our shared space, the feeling of unresolved tension never truly faded, resting just beneath the surface of our conversations. In the days that followed, I could sense the fragility of our relationship. It was like walking on a tightrope stretched high above the chaos of life, our very balance teetering on the edge of unspoken words. I started to find comfort in the routine of our days, the morning rituals of coffee brewing, the sweet scent of pancakes sizzling on a Sunday morning, the soft laughter of our kids echoing through the house while Tom and I exchanged fleeting glances, each one heavy with unarticulated thoughts. Some nights, after the kids drifted off to sleep, I would lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if what we had done was sufficient. Had we truly bridged the gap that had grown between us? Or were we merely placing a bandage over a wound that had yet to heal? Then came the day I found myself sitting in a small coffee shop, fingers wrapped around a warm mug, staring at my phone as I scrolled through a thread on r/AITA about a woman who had confronted her partner about their parenting. I hadn't planned on reading it, I just needed something to occupy my mind while I waited for a friend. But as the words unfolded on the screen, each confession, each struggle resonated deep within me. The comments decried her actions, some labeling her an asshole for creating unnecessary conflict. Others championed her courage, arguing that sometimes the hard conversations needed to happen to invoke change. I closed my eyes and imagined the context, bodies tense with unspoken frustration, a family dinner morphed into a culinary battlefield, emotions laid bare like tender flesh on display. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a real portrayal of what I had experienced, a realization that I wasn't alone in my thoughts, that perhaps I had inadvertently become a part of something larger. Arriving home later that day, armed with new perspectives but still clinging to the husk of my previous fears, I found Tom in the living room, a symphony of plastic toys littering the floor, the kids' laughter filling every corner. I felt a surge of gratitude for those moments, yet apprehension clawed at me from the inside, whispering that our home was both a sanctuary and a battleground. As we settled in for dinner, I picked my words carefully, wanting to engage but withholding a little out of compassion for both of us. I asked Tom how he felt about the kids' evolving behaviors, whether he noticed any shifts in their interactions. His brows furrowed as he chased a piece of broccoli around his plate, a clear sign of internal reflection. Sometimes, I worry I'm not doing enough, he admitted, the weight of his vulnerability striking a chord in me. I know the kids are learning from us, but what if I'm just showing them all the wrong things? As I watched him struggle, my heart ached at the vivid realization of his fears mirroring my own. And just like that, what began as a conversation about our children morphed into us slowly unpacking the expectations we had of each other as partners and as parents, the insecurities revealing themselves line by line. By the end of the meal, we were leaning closer, sharing laughter punctuated with confessions of self-doubt. It felt exhilarating, as if the heaviness of our situation had transformed into something lighter, a buoyancy infused into the atmosphere of our home. Several days later, we found ourselves sitting at the edge of our bed, the dim light of the nightstand casting a warm glow around us as I carefully broached the subject of another intervention of sorts, one that could involve family, a potential gathering of our in-laws and nearest friends to discuss parental roles in a supportive circle. Tom was hesitant at first, reflecting on the past dismissals and misunderstandings we had both endured, but our children's chaotic tendencies soon became the deciding factor. "I don't want to keep pretending we have it all figured out," he agreed softly, the resolve growing between us. "If it helps us, and them, to talk through this, then let's do it." So we did. We arranged for a small gathering that weekend, inviting only those who felt like pillars of our lives, supportive grandparents eager to lend advice and seasoned friends who had navigated similar waters. The night approached with a mix of excitement and anxiety fluttering in the pit of my stomach, and as they began to arrive, I could feel an electrifying energy dance through our home. In the warm embrace of friendly faces, we shared stories filled with laughter and also moments filled with stark reality, unveiling vulnerabilities as a collective group. Conversations laced with compassion drew forth advice, sparking lively discussions that felt refreshing and raw. I discovered that most of us were grappling with the same trials, the weight of expectations sometimes feeling like a heavy cloak we wore unwillingly. And it hit me, this sense of community was what I had craved, not just for my husband and me, but for all of us, feeding into the notion that parenting, like any venture, thrived in the laughter and wisdom shared among friends and family. As the night lingered on, we encircled one another in a way that transformed the situation from an intervention into a celebration of unity. Toasts and cheers echoed through the night as our children fell asleep, the gentle hum of laughter wrapping around them like a lullaby. And as the evening wound down, Tom and I found ourselves seated on the porch under a sprawling moon, the kind of night that felt expansive and eternal. We reflected on the beauty of the conversations and the progress we had made, not just within ourselves but as a couple willing to face the tumult of parenting hand in hand. Now, as I sit here sharing this journey, I reflect on how our night of vulnerability turned into newfound strength. The intervention had morphed into an act of love, revealing that within the chaos of life and the challenges of parenting, our love could still bloom amid all the uncertainty. We may not have it all figured out, but we no longer bore the responsibility of figuring it out alone. As the days turned into weeks, I could feel the fabric of our family life begin to knit itself back together. It wasn't an overnight transformation, rather, it was a slow, deliberate weaving of understanding and partnership. The mornings were still hectic, with our toddler, Max, bursting into our room with the enthusiasm of a small tornado, demanding breakfast and cartoon time before the sun had fully peeked over the horizon. Yet, during those chaotic moments, Tom and I leaned into each other more, sharing exasperated glances that spoke volumes without a word. We learned to tag team the morning madness, with me preparing the scrambled eggs while he poured the milk, together wrangling Max's unpredictable energy. We started finding humor in the fray, laughing off the days when breakfast ended with more cereal on the floor than in his belly, allowing ourselves the grace to be imperfect. In the evenings, we would sit on the worn-out couch, the remnants of our day still hanging in the air, as I would share the snippets of my workday, and he would recount absurd conversations with coworkers that made even the most mundane tasks sound like adventure tales. It was in these moments that I felt the walls we had built around our frustrations begin to crumble, allowing laughter and openness to seep through the cracks. I began to see Tom not just as my husband, but as my companion in this wild journey of parenthood, a navigation through laughter and chaos, mistakes, and small victories. One Saturday, with the sun warming the world outside, we planned a family outing to the local park, our first trip where we both felt equipped to handle Max's energetic bursts together. Tom and I held hands on the way, a small symbol of our resolve amidst the complexities. We shared the simple joy of watching Max run unabashedly toward the playground, his laughter echoing against the lush backdrop of summer. That afternoon was punctuated by sticky popsicles and spontaneous races, and with every shared experience, I felt the uncertainties of our earlier days start to fade into a warm, comforting glow. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, I turned to Tom, who was grinning as he swung Max into the air. It struck me then that our intervention had not only unveiled the cracks in our communication, it had also ignited a deeper understanding of what we could accomplish as a team. It was about pride, shedding the notion that we had to bear our struggles silently, and embracing the messy, beautiful experience of parenthood together. That evening, Lying in bed with the laughter and chatter of our lively boys still echoing in my heart, I reflected on everything we had faced. Sure, the journey wasn't perfect, and I knew moments of frustration might still come. Like any couple grappling with the weight of parenting, we'd have stumbles. Yet, we were now armed with somehow a clearer perspective. The intervention hadn't been a merely talking it out session. It had forged an unspoken pact that we would continue nurturing our relationship alongside our role as parents. Our love would not be a casualty of life's demands, but rather a partner in this beautiful, layered tapestry we were creating together. As I lay there, feeling the gentle rhythm of Tom's breath next to me, I reached for my phone to journal my thoughts. I didn't want to forget this feeling, the comfort of knowing he was on my side, that together we were ready to face whatever life tossed our way, however clumsy or chaotic it might be. And in the quiet hum of the night, beneath a blanket of stars, I couldn't shake the feeling that this very moment, marked by vulnerability and hope, was a chapter in our story that I'd always cherish, a reminder that amidst the challenges, love was our anchor. In this swirling world of parenting and partnership, I've come to realize that it's not about having every answer figured out, but rather dwelling in the uncertainty together, trusting that our willingness to communicate would continue to thread our hearts closer. As I drifted off to sleep, a soft smile danced on my lips. Perhaps it was true what they often say, the best conversations often begin from the most unexpected places, and sometimes, in navigating the storm, you find that you're creating not just a loving household, but a depth of connection that makes the journey worthwhile. The sun was dipping below the horizon as I sat on my porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands and the gentle rustle of leaves filling the quiet air. It was one of those evenings when the world felt still, a perfect backdrop for the thoughts swirling in my mind about my sister, Kathy, and her unusual fixation on her new child. She had been so ecstatic when she announced her pregnancy, and even now, weeks after little Milo's birth, the whole family was under the spell of this newborn. Everyone, it seemed, except me. As I sipped my tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, not with Milo, but with the way Kathy was treating him. The moment I stepped into her house for the first time post-delivery, I was hit with a wave of bizarrely exaggerated decor dedicated to him. Photos plastered across the walls, his name in neon lights above a crib that seemed more like a museum piece than a place for sleeping. It felt less like celebrating a life and more like a personal art installation from Kathy that demanded to reclaim the attention she had always been dependent on. I could recall something each time I visited, the wild comments rolling off her tongue, like how she believed Milo was destined for greatness, as if he were already writing the next great American novel from his crib. Wincing at such pressure woven into a life that was only just beginning, I wondered if anyone else saw the disconnection behind her infatuation. It all came to a head during this one family gathering. The air was thick with a mix of laughter and baby cooing when it slipped out, an offhand remark from me in a moment of terrible impatience. I had meant it lightly, but the words spiraled beyond my control. Kathy, I know you love him, but I don't think a plastic doll counts as a real baby. Her face had drained of color, and the entire room went silent, eyes darting back and forth between us. I could hardly breathe, the shocking realization of what I had said crashing over me like a wave, and suddenly I was the villain in everyone's tale. Kathy's hands trembled as she held Milo close to her, a line of protectiveness flaring to life. I watched her posture close in, her expression blackening like a storm cloud. What do you mean, a doll? He's my baby. She retorted, her voice sharp yet fragile, as if the words were made of glass. I stammered a half-hearted apology, fumbling with my thoughts in the face of her hurt. Part of me felt guilty for not taking her obsession seriously, but another part boiled with frustration. I loved her, and I wanted her to step back from this illusion, this almost delusional state she had created around motherhood, a base trust built on the genuine nurturing that true parenting demanded. Over the next couple of weeks, my life became a tangle of texts from family members asking if I was okay, trying to convince me to apologize profusely, or shaming me for my insensitive comment. Meanwhile, Kathy retreated into herself, avoiding me during family dinners, which just made the entire situation more awkward. I couldn't help but feel a swell of loneliness, like a haze settling over me. I kept fixing our broken relationship in my mind, pondering how I could ease her back to reality without jeopardizing our bond. Finally, in a moment of clarity amidst the fog of my anxieties, I sat down with a pen and paper. I wrote Kathy a letter, pouring out my heart in the way I couldn't face her directly. I told her I saw the mother in her, the love she poured into her baby, but that I worried she was losing the chance to be present in Milo's life by creating a world that felt unreal. A few days later, she responded. The letter was heartfelt, thick with emotion, but she'd woven in threads of defensiveness, describing how she felt so much pressure as a new mother to get everything right. I understood then that she wasn't just immersed in an illusion for my sake but for herself, a desperate attempt to claim identity in a role that felt immense and overwhelming. We met afterward at the park, the crisp air bringing fresh hope as I walked alongside her, both of us with our insecurities and tenderness laid bare. I promised to support her, to be there through the chaos and sleepless nights, and as we laughed at the ridiculousness of plastic dolls in the middle of our shared parental journey, I felt the aching distance begin to disappear, with the first baby steps toward reconciliation. So, was I the asshole? I asked her gently, needing to know if I had crossed a line too far. She shook her head, her lips curling upwards into a soft smile. No, just a blunt sister who cares too much. In that moment, the weight I had carried began to lift, crafting an opening through which trust and love could flow again. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, real and raw, ready to navigate this strange world of parenting together, one imperfect step at a time. A few months later, reflecting on that night, I found that Kathy had truly embraced the chaotic journey of motherhood. She had filled her home with memories instead of just decorations, and I often caught glimpses of her laughing at some mess Milo had made, remembering how quickly life can be both beautiful and exhausting. It was a reminder of the deeper roots of connection, real or metaphorical, the bond that continued to thrive despite the heated moments, rendering the word asshole a distant afterthought on our shared journey of love. As I settled into bed that evening, I took a deep breath, allowing the warmth of family and the nature of recovery to weave into my dreams, knowing that the true beauty of life lies in our imperfections. The next few days passed in a gentle blur, each moment blending into another like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. My thoughts danced between the sweet laughter of my niece and the shadows of that sharp confrontation with my sister. Sipping coffee in my small kitchen, I let my mind wander as I watched the rain streak against the window, imagining the little milestones I expected Milo to reach. And then, as if the universe cottoned to my neglect and acknowledging the unresolved feelings swirling inside me, my phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. It was a message from Claire, one of those whimsical updates she loved to send, featuring a video of Milo clutching at a stuffed giraffe while gurgling pleasantly. Despite the swirling conflict that had weighed on my heart, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of him, his innocent joy begging for love and attention. As the days rolled on, I found myself reflecting deeply about what had transpired between my sister and me. It wasn't just her intense love for Milo that prompted the conflict, it was my own feelings of disconnection and discomfort. I hadn't held a baby in years. I had no framework to understand my sister's adoration, which often felt overwhelming in its intensity. Is that why I reacted so harshly? I mused, tracing the lines of the wooden table with my fingers. It was a lesson in empathy, one that demanded from me an exploration beyond the tangible, into the depths of reason and emotion. Face to face with my own vulnerabilities, I understood that I had played the role of the contrarian, perhaps attempting to temper her unyielding praise with my rational skepticism, but in doing so, I had dismissed a fundamental part of her motherhood. Later that week, I decided it was time to extend the olive branch, realizing that this misunderstanding could easily fracture our close-knit bond if left unaddressed. I invited her for a coffee in a cozy cafe perched on the corner of our neighborhood, a spot that held joyful memories of laughter and sisterly connection. As I took a seat at the small round table, my heart fluttered with a mix of remorse and courage. Claire arrived shortly thereafter, her expression betraying a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Hey," she greeted, her eyes darting before settling on mine. A moment hung heavily between us, as if time itself was hesitating to take the next step. "Hey," I replied, motioning for her to sit. "I wanted to talk, to clear the air." She nodded, her fingers wrapping nervously around her coffee cup. The barista delivered our drinks, breaking the tension momentarily with the scent of fresh espresso and the quiet hum of cups clinking. "I feel like I hurt you when I said that thing about Milo," I began, my voice softer than anticipated as I approached the crux of our dilemma. "I shouldn't have dismissed your love for him. It's real and powerful, and it's something to be celebrated, not questioned." Her brow furrowed in contemplation. "It's just, sometimes, I feel like people don't understand," she finally admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "They think because I have a different experience of motherhood or maybe because I'm a little overprotective, it makes me less valid. I don't want you to see him like that." The air around us lightened. And I felt the walls we had built slowly begin to crumble. My heart ached for the love we shared but also for the walls we had built in moments of misunderstanding. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Claire." I've been struggling to connect with that part of your life. I just didn't expect the reaction I had, I confessed, a tremor within the lines of my voice. It was almost cathartic to admit that I had been caught off guard by the power of her maternal instinct, and in that breath of honesty, a subtle understanding bloomed between us. She nodded, her once tense posture softening with each word exchanged. As we continued to talk, honesty ricocheting between our hearts, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't anticipated. Sharing our fears, our insecurities as sisters navigated in different realms of life, allowed us to embrace the authenticity of our experience. The conversation drifted toward lighter topics, both of us eventually finding bits of laughter woven back into our dialogue. And right before we parted, Claire leaned over and took my hands in hers, her laughter rolling like waves echoing the warmth we had built back. Let's schedule a weekend together at my place? I'd love for you to spend time with Milo. I think he'll really enjoy getting to know his amazing aunt. When I returned home, the weight of conflict lifted significantly. I realized I had so much to learn, yet it was wonderful to resonate with the ongoing journey toward understanding. Through my sister's eyes, through her simplest joys, I could find connections twinkling in the small moments, an invitation to a new life cradled not just in love but also in the vulnerability of letting go of what I thought and embracing the reality of what truly is. Some days are beautiful messes, and I knew I had a part to play in coloring those experiences with her, as sisters and as a family. Over the following weeks, I remained intertwined with Claire and Milo's lives more intimately, engaging in every one of their innocent moments with increasing excitement. Eventually, as I lay down each night, I allowed myself moments to reflect on how beautifully tangled our lives had become. Each layer, each moment of honesty, formed an intricate tapestry of connection woven from love, understanding, and acceptance. In those peaceful reflections, intertwined with laughter and the echo of a new understanding, I found the kind of solace I hadn't known I was searching for. The realization dawned upon me as I drifted to sleep that maybe life's imperfections and challenges could incite the most profound connections, and it was those very bonds I'd built with my sister that reminded me of the remarkable tapestry of life we all share, even, and perhaps especially, when we don't fully understand each other. The morning sun broke through the curtains with a gentle glow, nudging me awake to another day intertwined with the realities of sisterhood and the enigmatic world of parenthood. As I rose from my slumber, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, beckoning me towards the kitchen where Emma busied herself, cradling Milo with one arm while stirring a pot of oatmeal with the other. The sight was almost cinematic, a perfect blend of chaos and tenderness that defined her new life. I couldn't help but smile, but a familiar twinge of guilt laced my thoughts. The previous day's confrontation hung in the air like an uncomfortable breeze, and I knew we hadn't fully wrapped up our discussion about what it meant to be a mother in her eyes versus mine. Over breakfast, our conversation flowed effortlessly at first, light-hearted remarks exchanged amid spoonfuls of oatmeal and the sporadic gurgle of Milo. But as Emma shared her latest parenting triumphs and trials, I could feel the unsaid words lingering between us, creating an important, yet unspoken, tension. Just as the atmosphere turned fragile, I watched her face transform, suddenly reflecting the worry I had seen only moments before in her laughter. "Do you really believe Milo isn't a real baby?" she asked, her voice hanging between vulnerability and defiance. My heart sank. I had never intended to undermine her journey, but the truth I spoke felt so distant from the love she poured into him. "It's not that he isn't real," I stammered, trying to tread carefully. "It's more about how we perceive these relationships. Your love for him is immeasurable, but I worry about how these expectations affect you." Her brow furrowed, and I could see the storm of emotions brewing just behind her eyes. "You think I'm playing house?" she hissed, each word a sharp shard. I could feel the ground beneath me shifting, my own heart racing as fear knotted my stomach. It was difficult to see my sister hurt, and the distance between our perspectives only widened in that moment. "No, Emma, that's not what I meant at all." My voice softened, the urgency to mend the rift propelling me forward. "I want to celebrate your bond. I see how much you love him, but I also want to make sure you don't find yourself lost in this identity." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "How can I be lost when I spent years dreaming of moments like these? How can you think I wouldn't know what's real?" There it was, the core of her pain, the feeling of not being understood, not being seen in the half-light of doubt I had cast over her life. I felt a wave of emotion crash over me as I searched for the right words to bridge the chasm. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling the sincerity of my apology wash over my words. "I'm afraid of what happens when the novelty fades and how it might feel to confront the reality of parenting. I just want to make sure you're okay." Her silence spoke volumes, a mixture of resentment, understanding, and perhaps a trace of compassion for my misplaced fear. We remained suspended in that moment until slowly, like the dawn creeping through the night, she exhaled deeply. "I appreciate your concern, but I wish you could trust me more. I'm deep in this, and it's beautiful, even if it's messy." Those words etched themselves on my heart, each syllable a reminder of the need for trust amidst uncertainty. With that, the tension began melting away as if the morning sunlight was burning through our darkness. We spent the rest of the day navigating shared moments together, plays with Milo transforming into laughter-filled bursts of joy, the kind only siblings can ignite in each other. As the hours passed, with each silly face made and every coup exchanged, I let go of the need to be right and allowed space for Emma to lead. When evening fell, and the amber dusk settled lazily outside the windows, we curled onto the couch, each cradling Milo, their hearts synchronized in a new rhythm of understanding. I held my breath as she began to sing softly, tapping into that innate bond that tied us together, unearthing things that transcended mere words. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, reassuring me that the journey we were on was uniquely ours, regardless of how we perceived it. I realized that love exists in its many forms, and in order to embrace that love, we didn't have to understand every facet of it, we simply had to accept it. That night, as I drifted into sleep once more, I felt a deep sense of peace, a profound connection to my sister fortified by our shared vulnerabilities. The beauty of our imperfect lives felt both heavy and light, reminding me that we carry each other as we navigate through the complexities of love and identity. My heart swelled at the thought of the many future moments we would continue to craft together against the backdrop of life's ever-changing tapestry. Although I hadn't found all the answers, I took comfort in knowing that I was never alone on this journey, and perhaps that was what mattered most. It's funny how a seemingly small, mundane moment can spiral into something significant in your life. I never thought tossing out a pillow would lead me to question the very fabric of my marriage. My name is Ethan, and I've been happily married to my wife, Lily, for nearly 6 years. We have those comfortable, cozy routines, the shared cups of coffee on a Sunday morning, evening walks after dinner, and the predictable rhythm of our lives together. But lately, there was something about our shared space that had begun to grate on my nerves, particularly one fluffy, lavender-colored pillow that we kept on our bed, a gift from her grandmother. I should probably mention that it was one of those pillows that carried a constant, overwhelming scent of lavender, almost sickening at times, masking the sense of my own comforting cologne that lingered in the air. At first, it was just a quirky part of our home, but over the months, its presence turned from soothing to suffocating, especially as we prepared for a week-long family stay. I could feel my irritation bubbling beneath the surface whenever I caught sight of it. It was always there, like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. The night before her family was set to arrive, I found myself tossing and turning, the pillow's scent invading my dreams, wrapping me like a shroud. At 2 a.m, exhausted and desperate, I finally snapped. I can still vividly recall the sensation of the pillow softening in my grip as I carried it down the hallway, heart racing, my mind flooded with conflicting emotions. I felt both reckless and relieved as I swung open the door to the storage room, a small space filled with boxes and old mementos, and pitched the pillow in. It sank into the darkness like a weight off my shoulders, and I felt a jolt of sick satisfaction. I spent the next few hours in a haze of guilt and triumph, thinking about everything else I could say about our relationship, but instead, her family arrived the next morning, and Lily hadn't even noticed her pillow was gone in the chaos of greeting them. But here's where things get tricky. As the day went on, I could see the tiniest hints of concern flickering in her expression. She searched our bedroom, rifling through drawers and shrugging off the chatter of her family, who were blissfully unaware of the mounting tension. I felt that gnawing sense of unease, the kind that creeps into the bathroom mirror when you stand alone, staring at your reflection, questioning your most recent choices. When she finally confronted me, not long after dinner, her eyes were wide, searching for reassurance in my expression. "Have you seen my lavender pillow?" The question, innocent yet loaded, hung in the air between us. I hesitated but ultimately confessed, feeling the flush of shame creeping up my neck. Her silence was deafening, the confusion morphing into something sharper. Instead of comfort, I had thrown away a part of her history, a small piece of her family. And I could see the quiet devastation etched in the lines of her face. Our subsequent conversation was heavy with emotion. I could sense the spiral of hurt in her voice, revealing how that pillow had connected her to memories of her childhood, evenings spent reading on her bed, and the warmth of her grandmother's embrace. My heart sank deeper with each story she shared, a gentle reminder that sometimes love can be tangled within the tiniest details of our lives. I apologized repeatedly, feeling utterly foolish for treating her cherished memory so carelessly. We stayed up late that night, navigating through laughter and tears, acknowledging the fragility of our emotions. I never imagined that a pillow could spark such vulnerability, forcing us to confront things we often take for granted. After we reached an understanding, we decided together to continue looking for that pillow, even if it meant rummaging through the heap of nostalgia and dust lurking in that storied room. The tension eased slowly, like steam from a boiling kettle, and I found peace in the act of searching for it together. It was a journey that brought us closer, reaffirming our commitment despite the initial bump in the road. Eventually, we unearthed the pillow, still rich with its lavender scent and the remnants of a once frayed. We laughed as I improvised a half-hearted excuse about its coziness and discarded it into another box, recognizing its significance but opting for a new beginning instead. In the weeks that followed, I realized that sometimes, it's the little things that matter most and remind us we're a part of something larger. Our relationships are built on layers of memories, some heavy and some light, but all woven together in unexpected ways. And even now, whenever that scent wafts through the room, it's a reminder not just of a pillow or a memory, but how heartfelt confrontation and vulnerability can mend things we didn't even realize were breaking. Update: a few months later, I stumbled upon a similar lavender pillow during a visit to a local store, and it stirred something unexpected inside me. With a gentle hesitation, I decided to buy it and, upon presenting it to Lily with a hesitant smile, I felt the warmth return to our bedroom. She took one look at it and burst into laughter, realizing the full circle nature of our pillow saga. The new lavender pillow graced our bed, not merely as an item of comfort but as a reminder of our journey, and now, whenever I catch a whiff of it in the air, I smile at how such a simple object can hold the weight of love and understanding. As the days progressed, the lavender pillow became more than just a comfort item. It seemed to weave itself into the fabric of our daily lives, an unspoken vow that we had made to each other to communicate openly and to embrace quirks, whether they be mine or Lily's. I found myself taking more time to appreciate the little moments we shared. Each evening, as we slid into bed, I noticed how the soft texture of the new pillow cradled our heads just right, its soothing scent enveloping us both in an atmosphere that fostered intimacy and warmth. One night, I turned to Lily, illuminated by the soft glow of our bedside lamp, and found her lost in thought, her fingers gently tracing the new pillow's edge. It seemed as if she was contemplating the journey we had just traversed. I asked her what was on her mind, and after a moment's pause, she admitted that she had been reflecting on how our pillow saga had inadvertently highlighted deeper truths about our relationship, how our unique little battles often revealed the ways we could grow together. She smiled then, that beautiful, sincere smile that lit up her eyes, and I felt a wave of fondness wash over me. We began to share stories from our past, laughing at the silly, stubborn moments we'd both experienced in our previous relationships, even during awkward shopping trips where preferences clashed like magnets with different polarities. Each anecdote drew us closer. I was reminded of how important it is to embrace and accept those differences, rather than let them fester into something that could harm the bond we nurtured. Days turned into weeks, and soon the pillow became a staple in our routine. It was a silent witness to our late-night conversations, whispered secrets, and gentle arguments over whose turn it was to choose a movie. We found harmony not only in our togetherness, but also in the acceptance of our divergences. The lavender aroma became a soothing constant in our home, an aromatic thread that knitted us closer every day. Yet, like all relationships navigating their intricate paths, we did stumble upon a moment of disquietude. One stormy evening, I returned home to find the light from our kitchen casting a warm glow through the window, a familiar sight that usually warmed my heart, yet on this particular night, something felt off. As I stepped inside, I noticed the electric tension in the air. Lily was seated at the kitchen table, her gaze fixed on the window, and I could see her shoulders slightly tense as I approached. Her silence spoke volumes. She seemed deep in thought, but frustration simmered just beneath the surface. I sat down across from her, the storm outside mirroring the brewing conflict between us. "What's wrong?" I asked gently, as I reached across to touch her hand. She pulled her fingers away, an act that stung unexpectedly, making my heart race with anxiety. "It's just. Sometimes, I feel like you still don't really get it, you know?" Her words hung heavily in the air. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, unsure of how to respond, but I pressed on. We spent hours unraveling our feelings, with the lavender pillow silently softening the edges of our tumultuous discussion. It was during that exchange that I realized how vital it was to keep the channels of communication open. My fear of conflict had often led me to be passive, while Lily's sensitivity to every little slight sometimes made her seem unyielding. Together we acknowledged the growing pains that had followed us from relationship to relationship. I wanted to assure her that I was committed to understanding her emotions, but my own insecurities struggled to surface amidst the haze of tension. We finally stood on a precipice. Either side could lead to deeper understanding or further resentment. After a long, watchful silence, I finally pulled the lavender pillow close to me and smiled weakly. "Maybe this pillow has more lessons for us than we thought," I said, chuckling softly, trying to diffuse the tension. Lily snorted in response, breaking the heaviness that had wrapped around us like a fog. As the laughter bubbled between us, we recognized the absurdity of letting such small misunderstandings amplify into something bigger. Our hearts lightened, and the glow in the room shifted. We promised to keep talking, to share our feelings no matter how uncomfortable they felt. With that, we drew together, the lavender pillow positioned as a bridge rather than a barrier. It was at that moment, nestled together in shared vulnerability, that the pillow gained yet another layer of meaning, not just a symbol of comfort, but a reminder of the importance of facing conflict together, wrapped up in love and understanding. There was something powerful in that concession. I couldn't help but feel grateful for the lessons still ahead of us, knowing that through it all, our lavender pillow would remain steadfast, soaking up the experiences of both laughter and tears, ever present on our journey together, guiding us toward deeper connection. As the days turned into weeks, the lavender pillow transformed from a mere item on our bed into an emblem of our evolving relationship. Each time I settled down at night beside Lily, I could feel the softness of that pillow cradling not just our heads, but our unspoken hopes and vulnerabilities. There were evenings when we discussed everything from work frustrations to dreams for the future, our heads resting upon it as if it were a shared confidant. It seemed like that pillow had the unique ability to diffuse tension, allowing us to speak openly, something we hadn't always done in the past. One particularly cool autumn night, when the leaves outside were swirling in the brisk wind, I decided to surprise her with a small picnic in our living room, laying out a blanket and preparing some of her favorite snacks. The casual atmosphere, punctuated with laughter, created a backdrop that felt almost magical. That evening, we talked more deeply than I had anticipated, delving into the very reasons behind our arguments, our dreams, and what we actually wanted for ourselves as individuals, and for our life together as a couple. It felt liberating, to be so open, and I found myself reflecting on the pillow's role as a catalyst for our newfound honesty. I shared my worries about our future, the concerns that gnawed at me daily, fears of stagnation, and unmet expectations, while she confessed her own feelings of inadequacy, the sometimes suffocating anxiety of living up to the ideal of being the perfect partner. We both laughed at our shared insecurities, realizing that the very things we thought made us incompatible were often the realities we both faced. As the sun dipped below the horizon, our conversation transitioned to lighter topics, such as that ridiculous pillow fight we'd had the week prior and her silly matriarchal instinct that had propelled her to guard her beloved cushions. I could see the glow of affection in her eyes as she recounted the moment she had chased me around the room, the carefree laughter reverberating off the walls, the moments I realized how resilient laughter can be in the face of even the toughest arguments. However, the deeper truth was that we were still learning, still navigating each other's intricate emotional landscapes with tender care. And it wasn't just about us. It became apparent that resolving our conflicts was essential for creating a safe space where our relationship could thrive. A few months later, as winter descended and we bundled up against the chilly winds, I felt a renewed sense of connection building between us. We'd found an equilibrium, largely thanks to that humble lavender pillow, which kept us reminded that love is not just about the easy moments. We often refer back to the day I had tossed the old one, laughing that it was the catalyst for change, a moment that pushed us to confront rather than sweep aside our frustrations. Eventually, the time came to celebrate our anniversary, and I wanted it to be special, a reflection of the journey we had embarked upon together. Little did I know that this night would not only mark our love but also balm old wounds. Preparing an intimate dinner at home, I set the table with the dishes we had shared on our very first date, recreating that familiar sense of nostalgia. After dinner, I surprised her with small gifts that told our story, simple, meaningful tokens that played into our shared history, the book she'd recommended that had remained unread on my shelf, a photograph of us taken on a rainy day when we had huddled under a single umbrella, and of course, another lavender pillow, this one softer than the last. As she unwrapped her final gift, the laughter bubbled up, and in that moment, it was evident that we'd not only survived our challenges but had also learned how to love more authentically. Because it wasn't about the gifts, or the pillows, it was about the memories behind them, the discoveries we had made about who we were, and the promise of learning more together. As I looked into her sparkling eyes, I realized that every pillow, every struggle, every moment was infused with the essence of us, reminders that, just like the lavender, our love could flourish in all seasons, rooted in respect, empathy, and a pinch of humor. It was comforting. It was ours. And I felt utterly ready for whatever the future would bring, knowing that a pillow wouldn't just rest on our bed, but would always be there to soften our disagreements and cradle our dreams together. It started as a typical Tuesday morning for me, the usual gray light filtering through the half-drawn curtains and the sounds of the neighborhood waking up. I shuffled into the dim kitchen, coffee brewing, thoughts racing ahead of me like they often do. I was just 2 weeks into my new job as a healthcare data analyst, and despite the monotonous tasks, I found myself strangely excited, like this was my first little step into a big, adult world. I had been vying for this position ever since I graduated, earning my degree with the hopes of making a real impact in the world of health services. My enthusiasm, however, took a strange twist when I received a call from my boss that day. He told me there had been a mix-up with patient records at a nearby clinic and that I would need to come in at the end of the day to help fix it. As someone who had always valued personal privacy and the importance of confidentiality, I was unsettled. The notion of accessing sensitive patient files made me shiver, but I shook off the discomfort, reminding myself this was part of my job. Fast forward to the evening, and I entered the clinic, feeling a knot in my stomach. The fluorescent lights above buzzed ominously as I was introduced to the IT team and pointed toward a small room cluttered with outdated computers. That's when I encountered her, Melissa, a nurse who seemed to embody calm in the storm of disarray surrounding us. As we sat together trying to untangle the mess, I tried to keep things lighthearted, joking about the nature of paperwork and technology, but she quickly quieted. "Just remember, HIPAA violations are serious," she said, her voice low and slightly unsteady. That warning took root in my mind, not because I was making any potential mistake but because I sensed something deeper in her tone, a burden she carried. I pressed her about it gently. "You seem stressed, Melissa. Is there something I should know?" She sighed, glancing at the door. "It's not about the patients who've already seen their records. It's about a new patient. You won't believe what happened." I felt a chill run through me as she recounted the tale. A patient, a woman named Sarah, had shown up mysteriously at the clinic requesting her records but had no identity. Melissa said Sarah wore odd clothing, spoke in riddles, and had an unsettling gaze that left the staff feeling watched. I could almost see the tension in her shoulders lighten as she spoke, a shared fear between us. It turned the mundane task of analyzing data into something almost mystical. Hours passed, and we were deep into a discussion of privacy, ethics, and the essence of patient identity when a sharp knock on the door jolted me upright. A man, disheveled and panting, burst in. "You found her, right? You have to find her," he yelled. The room fell silent before I collected my thoughts. Confusion swirled around us. Melissa ushered him outside, but I could hear a harried discussion happening just beyond the walls. It felt like an eruption that I was not meant to witness. When they returned, tension wound tighter than a coiled spring. The man explained, "Sarah is not who she says she is. She doesn't have a history in our files. It's like she's a ghost." He looked feverish, as though he had been chasing shadows. My heart raced. Was the woman we were trying to help someone trapped in a web of secrets? Or was she a danger, cloaked in anonymity? I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me, but curiosity tugged at my senses too. "What does she want?" I finally asked. The man's eyes darted, fear shadowing his breath. "She wants answers. She thinks someone is after her." We were thrown into chaos. As Melissa and I resumed our tasks, I could feel my pulse quicken at every intimate detail. Data entries felt like interrogations as I plotted course after course through our systems, trying to piece together the answers to the enigma concealed within our sterile walls. The weight of records heavier than I'd anticipated hung over me. I replayed our conversation about HIPAA over and over, ensuring I was not crossing lines I didn't intend to cross, while my mind tangled with each unexplained piece of information. It became an obsession. How could a woman simply not exist? As the sun fell further, shadows began to stretch along the walls, the clinic growing quieter. Eventually, Melissa and I navigated deeper into the records, sensing a shift of urgency as we worked to uncover the truth. When we finally hit pay dirt, an old record buried so deep that no one had bothered to check, it felt like winning a race against the clock. Her name popped up alongside a series of previous appointments and a disconcerting note that detailed an anomalous transfer between facilities. Melissa smiled with relief, but I couldn't shake the discomfort settling over me. I expected every moment to slip into the realm of horror, fearing it might spiral out of control. As we walked the records to our supervisor, I felt a strange pull back toward Sarah, like she was a part of me now. What came next was surprising. Melissa and I both had to face frustrating bureaucracy and laws, trying to make sense of Sarah's identity, the paperwork spinning us around in knots of red tape. Each phone call became a trial, testing the limits of propriety and patience until I was left wondering if we would ever resolve the chaos that had enveloped us. As the clock struck midnight, a decision had to be made, to keep looking and risk breaking rules or accept what we discovered and move on. Taking a breath, I opted for honesty. We approached our supervisor and bared the whole situation, feeling the weight of truth lifting us slightly. What followed were some tense moments I will never forget. My heart raced as the supervisor scrutinized our findings, and I held my breath, praying we hadn't ventured too far. In that moment of clarity, I understood the gravity of our roles, the essence of humanity fused into every record, and how vital it was to respect these lives woven together through the healthcare system. As for Sarah, the answer came swiftly. The right personnel followed up, though I never learned what fate awaited her. I left the clinic that night exhausted yet relieved, acutely aware that the thrill of ethereal mystery and the deeply rooted seriousness of caring for patient identity often clash in the world of healthcare. Months passed after that fateful evening, and the experience began to fade into a soft recollection, just another tale tucked into my mind, woven among the many threads of my career. Then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, I received a familiar message. It was Melissa. "Hey," it read, "you won't believe what I've just found out about Sarah." Curiosity surged through me, and as I read, I couldn't help but wonder if I hadn't just become part of the story of someone who had carved their existence between identities. Just like that, I realized, sometimes those we think are lost may hold secrets worth keeping, and our paths cross not by mere chance, but by a shared understanding of who we are beneath the masks we wear. And so I relayed back, "Tell me everything." Melissa's response came swiftly, like a whisper caught on the wind, full of urgency and intrigue. "I was going through some old social media posts, and it appears Sarah's been leading a double life. Did you know she used to work in a psychiatric hospital? She posted about her experiences under a pseudonym, and there are some pretty intense revelations in there. You should see the comments she gets, people sharing their struggles, their fears, and tying them into her stories in ways that are surprisingly insightful." A chill ran through me. I had known Sarah only as the soft-spoken woman with a penchant for vintage books and herbal teas, never as someone who had grappled with the complexities of mental health in a professional setting. "Do you think she's still in touch with anyone from there?" I texted, my mind racing with a river of thoughts. Would knowing more about her spark some deeper connection, or was this merely stumbling onto territory better left alone? Melissa replied in a way that made me think she had kicked her own thoughts around, too. "Well, I didn't dig that deep, but she mentioned a case in one of her posts. It was cryptically fascinating. You could check if any of her old colleagues are still around." The notion struck me hard. What if this case was pivotal, not only to Sarah's past but perhaps intertwined with her reasons for stepping back from society? Instinctively, I felt a wave of empathy wash over me mixed with a hint of dread. I couldn't help but picture Sarah, clocking in day after day, carrying the weight of another person's pain, while she herself might have been drowning in her own struggles. The next day was a haze of mixed emotions, curiosity mixed with caution. Somewhere within me, a voice cautioned against delving too deep, reminding me of my role as the friend of the storyteller, not the investigator. But I felt that I couldn't just let this mystery slip through my fingers. Before I knew it, I began my search, tracking down various forums where ex-employees shared their experiences. Each thread unraveled new layers, pieces of a puzzle that felt achingly familiar. Eventually, I stumbled across a name that stood out, Dr. Hargrove, Sarah's former supervisor. The reviews of her were a mix of reverence and caution, as people praised her for her intuition but also warned of her unwavering intensity. Feeling daring, I reached out to Dr. Hargrove via LinkedIn, but the message sat unanswered for weeks as I tried to balance my fascination with an uneasy sense that I was intruding on something far more personal than I could understand. Then, almost unexpectedly, the notification popped up. A quick blip that sent adrenaline coursing through me as I read Dr. Hargrove's reply. "Let's discuss. How did you come to know Sarah?" I paused, contemplating how to respond, businesslike, or friendly and casual, but in the end, emotion tugged at me. I filled my response with the truth, how Sarah had become dear to me over our conversations, artfully circumventing the eerie nature of my inquiry. Soon, we arranged a call. As we spoke, Dr. Hargrove shared fragmented tales of Sarah's time in the ward, illuminating flashes of bravery amidst darker times, illuminating how she had been a fierce advocate for her patients' rights. It felt like I was sitting on a springboard, ready to leap into the unknown depths of Sarah's past, and yet I could hardly breathe as she detailed an incident with a patient that almost garnished Sarah both admiration and ire within the hospital community. She pushed boundaries in ways that rattled some of the staff, the doctor described, her voice steady yet tinged with endearment. She believed in radical empathy, often becoming too emotionally involved in her cases. It led to a very critical incident that forced her to reevaluate her place in the world. My heart raced at the weight of her words. I realized that Sarah held stories that might shatter what I thought I knew of her. They were pieces of her soul woven into those moments, and whether she shared them freely or kept them locked away, they remained an inseparable part of her journey. As the call ended, a lingering question hung in the air. Was this knowledge something I should reveal to her, or would it expose vulnerabilities that Sarah had worked hard to conceal? In the following days, my heart grew heavier, crafting narratives in my mind where revealing this truth brought only pain. One night, unable to sleep, I took the plunge. I texted her, my fingers trembling over the screen. "Hey, can we talk? I found out some things about your past." Silence enveloped the air, thick and awkward as I stared at my phone, half hoping for a reply but equally dreading it. When her response finally came, it read simply, "About what?" My pulse quickened. She had a right to know that her reflections had inspired earthquakes in someone else's life. I told her everything, all at once, my heart racing, projecting my excitement while fearing the abrupt end of our connection. It was futile to deny, she was a storyteller in every sense. But Sarah's reply was slower this time, each dot cueing a new pang of anxiety within me. The chat fizzled out, leaving a stuttered beat of anticipation hanging thick in the air. With each passing minute, I replayed every detail, how brave she had been, how compassionate her words were, yet I feared for the memories that the shadows carved into her spirit, one she may not wish to confront. When she finally typed, "I didn't think anyone would ever ask me about that. It has been a while," I felt a tidal wave of relief rush through me. I stepped carefully, acknowledging the fragility housed in her revelation while also wanting to encourage her to share more. We spent hours on the phone after that, her words weaving a tapestry of pain and hope in ways I had never imagined before. I finally grasped the depth of her character. She wasn't lost between the stories and identities, she was the sum of them, an intricate web of experiences that continued to shape her. When our call finished, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, longing to draw her out of the shell that had quietly encased her. It became evident, sometimes, behind the closed doors of old memories, lies a path to healing, a beckoning for both of us to remind ourselves who we were beyond the masks we created. As the days turned into weeks, we exchanged messages more freely now, her guarded tone melting into something friendly and real. And I wondered, in passing, about what stories I too held tightly behind my own facade, cherished fragments that might intertwine with hers. Perhaps we both shared the weight of pasts and secrets, each of us learning to navigate our truths together, a quiet understanding that some journeys are meant to be shared. And so, in this tangled dance of revelations, Melissa's message came to echo within me. Sometimes those we think are lost hold secrets worth keeping, and who knows? Perhaps in every hidden truth lies the potential for connection greater than we could ever envision. Melissa's response was instant, a flurry of text that felt both electric and weighty. "You know Sarah, right? She worked at that clinic a few months back, the one where you used to go for therapy?" I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see me. The memories of that clinic were still vivid, the sterile smell of antiseptic mingling with the faint scent of lavender that the receptionist sprinkled in the air. Sarah had been warm, a gentle presence amidst the cold sterility of mental health care. "Well," Melissa continued, "she's been let go. They said it was for violating protocol, but there's more to it." At that moment, curiosity twisted in my gut. Sarah had always seemed so careful, so attuned to the patient's needs. What did she do? I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly as I awaited Melissa's reply. "I ran into her at the bar a week ago," Melissa wrote slowly, "and she was different. More erratic. She mentioned something about patient files, but she didn't elaborate. I think she might have been researching something she shouldn't have. And you know what's wild? She was asking about you." My heart skipped a beat. Why would Sarah be looking into me? Was she worried, or was it something deeper? The butterflies in my stomach fluttered violently as I recalled my last session with Sarah. She'd seemed concerned when I mentioned dreams that felt too real and haunting moments that clung to me like shadows. Was my own world now somehow threading into Sarah's unraveling tale? I let the questions linger as I replied, "What do you mean, asking about me? What did she say?" The pause felt interminable, each second stretching into infinity as I held my breath. Finally, Melissa's words came trickling through, laden with weight. "She seemed concerned about your last diagnosis. She mentioned she was worried you were in more danger than you realized." I felt a chill creep up my spine. My mind raced back to those countless times I had poured my heart into therapy, the honest exchanges that had found a home in Sarah's understanding gaze. Had I inadvertently exposed some hidden secret of my own? The idea that I might be a part of a story much larger than my own made me uneasy. I typed, "Danger? How? I don't understand." But before Melissa could respond, a flood of memories surged within me, the names, the diagnoses, the whispers of HIPAA that seemed to echo through the hallways of every psychiatric facility I had ever stepped foot in. Suddenly, I recalled my own feelings of being trapped, seen yet unseen, always an open book to those with the power to scribble in my pages. In that moment of reflection, I began to wonder if Sarah had realized that perhaps I was more than just another patient, more than just a series of symptoms and treatment plans drafted in the dim light of a therapist's office. Maybe I too had secrets worth sharing, though I had built my own wall to protect them. My thoughts spiraled again as Melissa's follow-up came. "She wanted me to find you and tell you this. She thinks you need to see her, to understand something she uncovered." My mind reeled. Was it reckless to consider meeting with someone who had been fired, someone on the fringes of this clinical world? Yet, a part of me felt the pull towards Sarah, an anchor that called out through the disarray of my thoughts. Maybe she held the key to understanding those hidden fragments of myself I had kept so tightly wrapped. "Where can I find her?" I found myself typing without thought. Melissa replied almost immediately, "I can give you her address, but I don't feel good about this, you know? Be careful." That care rang like a distant bell against the backdrop of my apprehension, and I found comfort in it, a reminder that I wasn't truly alone in this moment. As I read the address, a sense of determination washed over me, mingling with the anxiety that had taken residence in my chest. I could investigate my own narrative. Perhaps, like Sarah, I had been woven into a larger fabric of existence, one that danced between known truths and hidden realities. And so, with every heartbeat echoing my pulsing thoughts, I made up my mind. I needed to meet Sarah, to forge a connection that could shed light on her mysteries and perhaps my own. The sun dipped low in the sky as I prepared myself for the encounter. I felt the shapes of the shadows outside elongate, stretching toward the horizon, much like the threads of fate pulling us together. As I drove toward her address, the scenery blurred by, each mile marked with a question, a longing, an eagerness to embrace whatever awaited me. My mind buzzed like a hive, each curiosity a little bee searching for a flower, unsure of the nectar hidden within. Would I find answers to my own buried truths, or would I unravel the deeper meanings behind Sarah's journey? I parked outside a modest apartment complex that looked both inviting and intimidating, and as I stepped out of the car, a strange calm settled over me, settling the racing thoughts tumbling like jumbled leaves in the wind. I approached her door and raised my hand to knock, my pulse quickening as I fought the urge to turn back. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I knocked. Each sound echoed like a heartbeat against the wood. I stood there, waiting, breath held. It felt as though the world had condensed into this moment. A few moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing Sarah's familiar face, though it seemed altered, marked by worry and disarray. Her eyes flickered with recognition and a hint of relief, as if she had been bracing herself for this moment. "You came," she said softly, and just like that, I stepped over the threshold, into her story, our stories united, as curiosity whispered infinite possibilities of truths yet to be revealed. And as I crossed into her living space, amidst the clutter of papers, stray books on mental health, and empty coffee cups, that sense of connection blossomed, cradled in the realization that perhaps every secret worth keeping leads us not just into shadows, but toward the light of understanding ourselves and one another. I never imagined I would be caught in a struggle between my boyfriend and my father, but sometimes life throws you into the most unexpected conflicts. Growing up, my dad was my rock, the kind of guy who taught me how to ride a bike on a rickety old road, always standing close enough that I felt his presence but far enough that I had to find my balance. He expected nothing less than the best from me, and after my parents' divorce when I was 12, he stepped up to play both roles, becoming fiercely protective of me. I fell in love with Caleb during my sophomore year of college. He had this effortless way of making me laugh, and I felt alive in ways I couldn't explain. Our differences were palpable, While I strived for perfection, my dad's influence still loomed large. Caleb thrived in a world of creativity and spontaneity, often nudging me to break free from my carefully crafted plans. Our relationship flourished, but there was always this looming question in my mind: would my dad approve of him? Things took a sour turn when my family invited me to dinner, a rare event since our schedules rarely aligned. I was excited to introduce Caleb to my dad, hoping they'd hit it off and I'd finally have some peace of mind regarding my father's opinions on my choices. The evening started pleasantly enough, but as the conversation turned, I felt the tension in the air when the topic of Caleb's career in graphic design came up. My father, who had always prioritized traditional paths, openly criticized Caleb's work, dismissing it as a hobby rather than a viable career. I could feel my heart race as Caleb sat there, visibly uncomfortable, trying to maintain his composure while my father launched into a monologue about the virtues of financial security and a stable job. I had been quiet, biting my tongue, but suddenly, I felt this surge of protectiveness swell within me. "Dad, that's unfair," I finally said. "Caleb works hard for what he does. Being a creative doesn't mean he isn't ambitious." The moment my words left my mouth, the room went eerily silent. I held my breath, anticipating my father's reaction as the tension seemed to cling to the walls. He frowned, his disappointment palpable. "You shouldn't be defending him, Ava. You need to look out for yourself, not this boy who can't even provide stability." I felt a flash of anger stir up my insides, blurring that well-practiced boundary of respect I usually maintained. "I'm not defending him, Dad, I'm defending what I believe in. He's passionate and talented, and honestly, I think you're missing the bigger picture." Caleb shot me a grateful glance, but I could tell the weight of scrutiny had doubled. The conversation spiraled. My dad chastised me for placing my love life above my future, and I accused him of living in a box built by his own rigid beliefs. It was an unusual role reversal. My voice seemed to overpower his, yet in the pit of my stomach lingered this heavy sense of dread. Was I being unreasonable? As emotions continued to clash, I realized I felt torn. Here was my dad, who had sacrificed so much for me, and on the other hand, Caleb, who had become my world in such a short time. I saw how frustrated Caleb was becoming and how my dad's words seemed to chip away at his self-esteem, even if he tried to hide it with that charming smile. "I think I need to go," Caleb finally said, his tone strained, and it felt like a punch to the gut. I watched as he stood up, the vulnerability in his posture cutting deeper than any argument could. My chest tightened, and I fought the urge to call him back, but instead, I just stood there, caught in this awful limbo of loyalty and love. After he'd left, my father said, "See, Ava? That's exactly what I'm talking about." But his words only fueled my determination. I wasn't going to let this end here. I spent days reflecting on that dinner as I kept in touch with Caleb, our conversations growing sweet and tender through late-night texts. I realized I needed to stand up for our love, to carve my own path rather than allow my father's expectations to influence my decisions. It took a few more awkward dinners and conversations, but slowly, I began to cultivate this new understanding between us. I invited Caleb over for coffee one afternoon, brainstorming ways to maybe patch things up. Eventually, I found the courage to invite my dad to meet with us again, and I explained how important Caleb was to me. I wanted my father to see beyond the surface, to understand the depth of Caleb's character, the kindness, the creativity, the way he believed in me just as fiercely as my dad did. When the day came for us to sit down together, my hands were clammy with nerves. I was shocked to see Caleb and my dad shake hands, both visibly tense. But this time, my voice held steadiness as I guided the conversation, sharing stories about Caleb's projects and aspirations. There were moments of quiet where skepticism hung in the air, but slowly, I watched as my dad's expression shifted, curiosity taking the place of disdain. They even exchanged a few laughs, and by the end of the afternoon, my dad begrudgingly admitted that he underestimated the depth of Caleb's passion. I could feel a weight lift off my shoulders, a tentative bridge being built between the two most important men in my life. Looking back now, I can't help but reflect on those swirling emotions and the daunting task of reconciling family expectations with love. My father's approval is still something I hold dear, and while Caleb and I still face challenges regarding our paths, we've grown stronger for it. I can wholeheartedly say that standing up for what I believe in was the right choice. Sometimes, love needs defense, especially when it's challenged by those who care about us most. Update: after that dinner, things have genuinely improved. My dad even asked to see some of Caleb's artwork, and I caught him smiling at a few pieces. It's still a work in progress, but I feel like we're finally striking a balance. Caleb has a small exhibition coming up, and my dad is planning to attend. Who knows, maybe they'll bond over creativity after all. I'm ready for whatever comes next, holding love and family close. It's been a few weeks since that dinner where tensions ran high but ultimately led to some breakthroughs. I've been thinking a lot about how love isn't just a feeling but a series of choices we make, sometimes in the face of opposition. My relationship with Caleb feels more solid than ever now. Each evening, after long days spent at work, we'd return to my cozy little apartment filled with the scent of his latest cooking experiments, usually something vibrant and aromatic. I would sit at the kitchen island, watching him chop vegetables with deft hands while sharing stories about our day, the comfort of his presence melting away the stresses of the outside world. He often joked about his own art, claiming that cooking was just another form of creativity, albeit with delicious results. The laughter that bounced off the walls during these moments felt like little victories, reminders of the bond we were nurturing together. However, the shadow of that family dinner lingered in my mind, especially as I grew excited about the upcoming exhibition. Caleb had poured his heart, his very essence, into his art, and I was both proud and anxious. Would my dad truly come? The thought of my two worlds colliding was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. One afternoon, I was organizing the invites for the exhibition in our shared workspace. I came across a beautiful canvas that Caleb had kept under wraps. It was his latest piece, a vibrant abstract bursting with swirls of color, emotion radiating from every brushstroke. I asked him about it, and he reluctantly revealed that it was inspired by his struggles, his feelings of insecurity, of being a misfit in a world that seemed to favor conventional status quos. As he described his process, I could see the passion in his eyes. A thought crossed my mind: if my dad could see beyond the surface, maybe he could understand Caleb's journey, the vulnerability he infused into every work of art. The day of the exhibition arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. The gallery echoed with the anticipatory energy of art lovers and critics mingling in hushed tones, their gazes swept across the canvas walls. When I finally spotted my dad entering, his expression was inscrutable. Caleb gave him a genuine smile from across the room, his enthusiasm palpable, and I squeezed my hands together, silently urging my dad to let his guard down. As the evening progressed, I caught snippets of conversation. My dad scrutinized the artwork, sharing anecdotes with fellow attendees, and to my relief, I noticed his expression soften when he commented on one of Caleb's pieces. They eventually gravitated toward each other, and before I knew it, Caleb was showcasing his work, sharing not only the artistic techniques but the stories woven into each piece. The highlight of the night was when Caleb revealed that the colorful abstract I had seen earlier represented the complexity of human emotion, the very thing that often isolates us. My heart swelled with pride, and I watched my dad through the crowd as confusion gave way to understanding. He listened intently, a flicker of something like admiration flickering in his eyes. I breathed a sigh of relief, allowing myself to hope that this exhibition wasn't merely a stepping stone for Caleb, it also served as a bridge between my father's skepticism and Caleb's dreams. As the night wore on, I couldn't help but notice the moments of laughter shared between them, two souls who had once clashed but were now stepping cautiously into the light of each other's worlds. After the exhibition, I found the two of them standing slightly apart, discussing art. I felt a surge of warmth. They were laughing, the walls that had divided them starting to crumble. My dad even complimented Caleb, saying he admired his unique approach. Those words settled like a sweet balm over my heart, soothing the worries that had kept me awake at night. As I moved closer, catching snippets of conversation, I realized that my hope wasn't misplaced. They were talking openly, sharing their perspectives, and I felt as if I were witnessing a new chapter unfold before my eyes. Later that night, when Caleb and I lay side by side on our couch, the glow of the city lights filtering through the window, I couldn't contain my excitement. "I think they really connected tonight," I whispered, my voice barely breaking the comfortable silence. He nodded slowly, tracing patterns on my arm as a smile spread across his face. "Your dad has a lot of wisdom. I just hope he sees that my work comes from a place of honesty," I reassured him, my heart racing. "He does, he really does. I felt it, Caleb. Whatever it is, we're making progress." He wrapped me close, and I realized, in that moment, that love isn't just about finding the right person, it's about creating a little sanctuary amidst the chaos of conflicting lives. When we support one another, we create spaces for understanding, transformation, and healing. As I drifted to sleep that night, visions of the exhibition danced in my mind, vignettes of laughter, creativity, and warmth. Perhaps the road ahead still held challenges, but we were ready for them, carrying love and family close to our hearts, ever hopeful for what lay ahead. The day of Caleb's exhibition arrived, and I stood before the mirror, adjusting my hair and replaying the countless scenarios in my mind. Each thought seemed to intertwine like threads in a tapestry, weaving together excitement and apprehension. What if my dad was still skeptical? What if Caleb felt uncomfortable in the spotlight? But as I stepped into the living room, I found myself inexplicably buoyed by the bright morning light streaming through the window, illuminating the tight-knit atmosphere of anticipation that surrounded us. Caleb paced nervously, tiny flecks of paint smudged on his hands, remnants of late-night creativity. He caught my eye and smiled, a mix of vulnerability and pride gracing his features, and I knew this moment mattered more than the fear swirling in my mind. We arrived at the gallery, an eclectic space bursting with vibrant colors and the chatter of other artists and patrons. My heart raced as we walked through the entrance, the walls adorned with Caleb's pieces, each stroke, each color, an echo of his soul. Glancing towards my dad's reserved expression, I noticed a flicker of curiosity beneath his stoic demeanor. It was as if he stepped into an entirely new world where the art spoke louder than words, unearthing emotions that had long often been buried. As the evening unfolded, friends gathered, laughter floated through the air, and more than a handful of warm exchanges transpired, my connection with Caleb growing deeper amidst the shared joy around us. My dad, quietly attentive, lingered near one of Caleb's larger pieces, a brilliant depiction of a stormy ocean met by a delicate sunrise. I could see his brow furrowed slightly, and in that moment, I felt this strange mix of hope and dread. What was he thinking? Caleb approached, his own uncertainty evident, but to my astonishment, my dad struck up a conversation, sparking a dialogue about the inspiration behind the painting. As I hovered nearby, pretending to examine other works while holding my breath, I listened to them exchange thoughts on creation and passion, their faces lighting up with every shared enthusiasm. There was something extraordinary about that moment, watching my worlds collide, like the sun breaking through clouds. I found myself reflecting on how art can bridge gaps, creating shared experiences that foster understanding. It wasn't just the bonds we cherished with those we love, it was also about allowing them to redefine assumptions about who we are and what we're capable of. Hours slipped by in a slow, colorful dance of connection, and as the gallery began to wind down, Caleb offered my dad a framed piece that he hadn't intended to display. It was a small canvas of a sunset casting hues of orange and lavender over a silhouetted shoreline, the waves gently lapping at one another, capturing the serenity of nature, themes of hope and possibility layered within the brushstrokes. "I thought you might appreciate this," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the tension that still lingered in the air. Dad's expression softened as he accepted the gift, his fingers tracing over the edges of the frame, seeming to absorb its significance. It was as if all the barriers that once existed were systematically crumbling right before my eyes. Dad glanced up at Caleb, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of recognition, a sense of understanding that transcended boundaries. "I'd like to learn more about your work, Caleb," he said, and the words hung in the air like music, sweet and unhurried. After the exhibition, I found myself drawing a breath of relief, my body instinctively relaxing. We drove home in a comfortable silence, Caleb's hand clasped tightly in mine. The possibilities of a reconciled relationship between my dad and the love of my life felt tangible, like the name of a spell whispered in the dark. As days turned into weeks, my dad consistently asked about Caleb's latest projects, engaged in conversations with full-blown enthusiasm, and I witnessed the transformation of two previously disconnected worlds. Our family dinners transitioned from awkward silences to lively discussions, laughter spilling around the table as stories unfolded like delicate origami. Reflecting on the journey, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me. It was undeniably hard navigating love between family and partners, and yet it seemed we were learning to make room for all that life threw at us. Even simple moments, sharing our thoughts over dinner, visiting the gallery again, or watching the sunset together, redefined our connections in a fresh light. After a month, Caleb humorously dubbed my dad his new art critic. I could only laugh, grateful for the emergence of something so beautiful from what had once felt so threatening. The path ahead remained full of surprises, but we'd walk it hand in hand, a little more resilient with every stride. And every night, as I tucked myself into bed, my heart overflowed, cocooned within the safety of love and the newfound bond of family. This interconnectedness, was more than I had ever hoped for. Each day was a testament to what could be achieved when love was held fiercely amidst life's unexpected challenges, slowly morphing into something rare and profound. The horizons before us now stretched far and wide, yet still, under the painted stars, I felt a sense of peace knowing we were ready to embrace all that lay ahead. It started on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind that melts into your memory like butter on warm bread. My friend Lily had come over for dinner. She was what people called a people person, always bubbling with enthusiasm, her wide smile lighting up any room. I'd known her for years, but I was beginning to worry that her inquisitiveness was turning into a kind of obsession, especially concerning my girlfriend, Maya. Upon our first introduction a few months ago, Maya had been shy, and who could blame her? She was stepping into a circle of friends who had known each other for ages, and I felt a twinge of protectiveness towards her. While Lily greeted her with a warm embrace and relentless questioning, I brushed it off, thinking perhaps it was just Lily being herself. But over time, I saw how Maya's shy demeanor would slip into discomfort whenever Lily would pry into her personal life, questions about her family, her job, even the small scars on her wrists that she often covered with long sleeves. I could sense Maya's unease but tried to ease it by changing the subject or steering the conversation in a different direction. That night, I made pasta, a simple but delectable dish that usually brought us all together. However, the tension simmering beneath the surface lingered like an uninvited guest. Halfway through dinner, Lily leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "So, Maya, why don't you tell me about the therapy you were in? I've been dying to know what that was like." I saw Maya's cheeks flush, her fork pausing mid-air, and I felt the heat rise within me. My heart raced as I struggled to find the right words. It wasn't merely curious questioning, it felt invasive, and in that moment, my protectiveness flared. I turned sharply to Lily, perhaps too sharply. "Can you just drop it, Lily? Not everyone wants their history dissected at the dinner table." The silence was thick, as if the air had been sucked out of the room, Maya's eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of relief, but I could also see her disappointment. I felt bad almost instantly for raising my voice, but I was too wrapped up in my determination to shield Maya from Lily's relentless probing. It felt like a necessary, albeit awkward, confrontation that I hoped would put an end to Lily's intrusive nature. After dinner, things were tense. Lily muttered a half-hearted apology, but I could see she didn't grasp the gravity of her actions. Maya's eyes, usually a vibrant mix of green and brown, appeared dulled by discomfort. She was sweet and didn't want to create waves, but I knew she felt uneasy around Lily, and I couldn't shake the guilt spiraling within me for yelling at someone who had meant no harm. That night, I lay awake, replaying the moment in my mind. I wondered if I had overreacted, if maybe I could have found a gentler way to enforce boundaries with Lily. I cared about her, too. She had always been helpful and supportive in past relationships, but this time it felt different. As weeks passed, I tried talking to Lily, attempting to mend whatever rift my outburst had created. But she remained distant, and every attempt I made seemed to elicit more frustration from her, which pushed me further into my shell. On the other hand, Maya and I grew closer as she began to confide in me more. Our conversations turned from light-hearted banter to deeper discussions about her past, her struggles, and her triumphs. I saw the person she truly was, a fighter under the surface, and that made me question whether enforcing boundaries with Lily had been worth it. Until one evening, after another dinner filled with awkward silences and strained jokes, Maya gently placed her hand on mine. She looked into my eyes and said, "I don't need you to protect me from her, I can handle it. But don't you dare push me away for her." It was a wake-up call, and I realized in that moment that I was being unfair to her for not trusting her capacity to handle the situation and unfair to Lily for not giving her the chance to admit her mistakes. That night, I decided to fix things, not just for me, but for Maya too. So, I called Lily, filled with newfound conviction, and invited her to join us for brunch that coming Sunday. When the day arrived, I took a deep breath and confronted her in front of Maya, articulating how I felt about her questions and how they affected Maya, not accusing, but inviting her to understand. Shockingly, she listened, really listened. I saw that familiar glimmer of understanding in her eyes, and that day, the air became lighter as we all discussed boundaries and respect in relationships. It felt liberating, like we were redefining our friendship for the better. Later that evening, as we departed, Lily hugged me and promised to be more mindful. Maya smiled warmly, and for the first time in months, I felt that comforting optimism about our relationships, a refreshing reminder of the complexities of friendships and love. A few weeks later, I received a message from Lily, asking about Maya's writing ambitions and how she could support her. I chuckled. It seemed Lily had genuinely dug deep in her heart to unpack her inquisitive nature. Life felt balanced again, reminding me of the delicate dance we all engage in when connecting with others, a dance, often complicated, yet ultimately worthwhile when met with honesty and understanding. I thought about the message while sitting at my desk, the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds, casting long, warm shadows across the wooden surface. The way Lily had reached out felt like a gentle olive branch after a storm, something I had not anticipated but desperately needed. Her newfound interest in Maya's ambitions struck me as sincere, perhaps even a realization of her previous intrusiveness. I also couldn't shake off the feeling that my explosion of frustration had not just changed the dynamic of our relationships but had forced everyone, including myself, to take a step back and reassess boundaries. My feelings for Maya lingered in the back of my mind. They sparkled with a mix of pride and affection as I recalled how passionately she spoke about weaving her fears and dreams into narrative threads. I contemplated how hard she worked, often into the early hours of the morning, hunched over her laptop, chasing her elusive dreams. To see her finally getting recognition from conditions outside our little circle felt like fireworks within me, igniting a sense of gratitude for the seemingly chaotic path that had led us all here. When I presented Lily's message to Maya during our weekend coffee ritual, a comforting routine where laughter punctuated our still morning moments, she perked up, her eyes dancing with enthusiasm. "I think it's sweet," she exclaimed, the genuine warmth encapsulating her more than the caffeine ever could. As we discussed the best responses to send, I dug deeper into my thoughts. Maya, maybe this could encourage her to be more supportive rather than just nosy? My intent was to prod her to see it as a chance for healing, for growth, and a possible bridge forward. Throughout the week, my optimism clung to me, unwavering, as if I had gathered energy from the harmony that surrounded us. I began noticing small changes within our group dynamics. Lily's inquisitiveness shifted from being prying to a form of support. She began asking more about Maya's work in the positive light of genuine interest. During our usual game nights, instead of steering conversations toward the personal, Lily inquired about story ideas and offered her own interpretations of Maya's themes, which sparked delightful discussions and sparked inspirations. The months of tension seemed to evaporate, replaced by the sweetness of camaraderie regrowing gently. Yet, the trip was not without its nuances. My instinct to protect Maya sometimes felt overwhelming. I would catch myself watching Lily closely, waiting for signs of her curiosity morphing back into the invasive territory we had danced around before. Maya noticed the change in me, and during one quiet evening as we strolled along the lit-up streets, she turned to me, her expression serious yet soft. "You know, I can handle Lily," she assured, and in her voice lay the strength that had drawn me to her in the first place. "Her curiosity comes from a good place now, she just needed a little nudge to realize how much more significant it is to listen than to pry." In that moment, I recognized the foundation Maya had built, not just for herself in her writing, but in our friendships too. I felt both admiration and resignation, a quiet acceptance that we all must learn, stumble, and yet eventually grow into a better version of ourselves. Thus, I put aside my protective instincts and focused instead on my own growth, fostering a healthy space where the line between support and nosiness could stand strong and clear. With time, I slowly allowed my defenses to lower. I was learning, just as Maya was, that relationships thrive not on the avoidance of conflict but through engagement and resolution. An unexpected evening rolled in when I checked my phone to find a notification. It was a group message from Maya, presenting a small gathering, an invitation to share her writing project with friends, including Lily, who had no idea she'd be involved. The anticipation mixed with nervous excitement fluttered in my chest as I read Maya's words aloud, the rhythm of her voice echoing through our cozy living room. "I'm inviting you all over next week for a reading and discussion. Bring your open minds, and maybe some snacks." As the date approached, I marveled at how much had transpired within a short span. Though apprehensive, the prospect of unearthing these unspoken conversations excited me. On the evening of the gathering, as friends settled into our living room, I sensed a comforting energy filling the air, like a soft blanket ready to wrap around us. Lily arrived promptly, her eagerness palpable, and I watched how she interacted with Maya. They exchanged anticipatory glances, and Lily listened intently as Maya shared her thoughts and insights on her work and the journey she took to get there. I felt proud, my heart swelling as I noticed the respectful curiosity Lily demonstrated, and perhaps it was then that I realized this night was not merely about Maya showcasing her writing, it was an exploration of friendship, vulnerability, and personal growth within the space we shared. And so, as Maya began to read, her voice resonating beautifully in the hushed room, I leaned back, enveloping myself in the warmth of connections rekindled, recognizing that life, in all its complexities, often finds a way to heal if we gather the courage to confront it. Many years down the line, those moments would live with me, whispering reminders of the growth found along this intricate journey of friendship and love. And in that beautiful small room filled with words, laughter, and understanding, we found our dance, soft, gentle, yet vibrant against the backdrop of all we had endured. As the years unfurled, life continued weaving its intricate tapestry, capturing threads of joy, sorrow, and unexpected revelations. Those evenings with Maya and Lily remained etched in my memory, like a favorite song whose melody, once heard, resonates forever. The three of us settled into a new rhythm. It felt as if we had taken each other's hands, stepping in sync to a beat of shared ambitions and mutual respect. Maya blossomed in her writing. She began getting published in local magazines and sharing her work at open mic nights. I watched her shine brighter with every word she shared, the girl who had once been hesitant now standing tall at the podium, radiating confidence, her stories captivating everyone around. Lily, too, found her own sense of purpose. Inspired by Maya's artistic journey, she explored her passion for photography. She would often invite us to join her on weekend shoots, the three of us wandering through streets, capturing candid moments of life. As we traipsed through parks, urban corners, and hidden alleyways, I became fascinated by how Lily would frame her shots, the way the light could transform an ordinary scene into something extraordinary. In those moments, it felt like we were painting a larger picture together, more than just a collection of memories, but a testament to how our keen interests intertwined beautifully. Still, lurking beneath the surface, I could feel the remnants of those early conflicts, whispers of residue from our past misunderstandings. Occasionally, even in our newfound harmony, my mind would drift back to that day when I had exploded at Lily for her intrusive curiosity, wondering if the shadows of it would ever truly fade. There would be moments when she would joke about her nosiness, laughter filling the air, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of needing to protect Maya, that instinct to shield her from anything that might taint her blossoming confidence. It was a delicate balance, the weight of our past pressing lightly on my shoulders, and yet I found comfort in knowing our bond was stronger than those fissures. One evening, as we gathered at our usual spot, a local cafe adorned with fairy lights and the aroma of fresh pastries wafting in the air, Maya surprised us both. She shared that she'd been accepted into a writing retreat, an opportunity she had been coveting for years. The excitement in her eyes was contagious, a spark igniting between us. "I can't believe it," she exclaimed, her voice ringing with disbelief. "I actually made it." Lily and I erupted in joyous applause, our cheers mingling with the sound of clinking coffee cups and the soft hum of chatter surrounding us. Yet, as I basked in the delight of her moment, I could sense the undertow of fear that often came up during periods of immense personal growth, the fear of change. But what if it's not what I expect? Maya pondered aloud, her brows knitting together in concern. In that instant, it was easy for me to forget my silent reservations. I leaned closer. "But what if it is? What if this is the beginning of something incredible?" I responded, remembering how we had navigated through uncertainty together. And as Maya brunched a motivational speech into the air, Lily chimed in, reminding us both of the beauty that lies in risk. That evening, we took our time sipping on rich, dark coffee and indulging in sweet pastries. We exchanged dreams, fears, and heartbeats, creating a mosaic of our aspirations. It felt liberating to witness how far we had come while knowing the journey was far from over. Weeks passed, a gentle flow guiding us toward Maya's retreat date. In the hustle and bustle of preparing, I received a call from Maya after she had settled in at the retreat house. Her voice trembled with a mix of excitement and vulnerability. "I thought I'd be terrified, but everyone here is so supportive. I feel my heart opening up in ways I never knew were possible." I could hear the warmth in her tone, a reflection of how far she had come. As I listened, I realized that she was carving out not just her identity as a writer but also reshaping how we all understood our connections to one another. When Maya returned, there was a lightness about her, a deeper understanding that seemed to transcend words. One evening, as we gathered on my porch, she shared stories of vulnerability shared among writers, of finding not just advocacy but community. That night, as the stars blossomed overhead, those shadows of past misunderstandings and echoes of our complex beginnings simply vanished amidst the laughter and the warmth of friendship. Reflecting on our journey, I understood our dance. Life is a dance, indeed, sometimes solo, sometimes in pairs, often a whirlwind of unpredictable turns and dips, but always brighter on the other side when the music stops. Time has its way of binding souls, if only we dare to unfurl our hearts. I cherish that, for the growth we had experienced was profound. Roots woven through the complexities of our relationships had forged a canopy of understanding and strength, a shelter in which we could hone our dreams uninhibited. And so, beneath the vastness of those shimmering stars, I held that night close, a vivid reminder to embrace all the intricacies threading through the heart of friendship, love, and shared journeys. I never thought a simple dinner would unravel the delicate web of my family's dynamics, but that's exactly what happened one fateful evening when my mom's boyfriend, Todd, crossed a line I thought was unimaginable. I've always taken pride in being the rational one in the family, calm, collected, and a fierce protector of the boundaries I believed should never be crossed. My mom had met Todd about 6 months prior, and while I was initially supportive, I gradually grew uneasy. Todd was charming in that way that feels forced, often masking what I couldn't quite place. My gut instinct screamed that his charisma was more a facade than anything genuine. On the night in question, dinner was supposed to be just pasta and garlic bread, a simple affair to celebrate my mom's birthday. The air was thick with the warmth of nostalgia as my mom smiled at the table, her cheeks glowing like the candles flickering nearby. I didn't understand the palpable tension until Todd made an offhand comment about my weight, something he couched in concern, but struck me like a lightning bolt. "You know, if you cut out carbs, you might feel a lot better," he said, chuckling lightly, looking directly at me as though he were giving wise, unsolicited advice. My fork clattered onto the plate as I momentarily lost my voice, the blood rushing to my ears muffling the light-hearted chatter of the other guests around us. I could see my mom's eyes widen with embarrassment and horror, yet her defensiveness seemed to evaporate in the air, as though she were mourning the loss of the good time rather than standing up for me. The tension wrapped around my throat like a noose, and as Todd continued to make jocular remarks about my youthful resilience, I felt my whole body flush with anger. I excused myself to the bathroom, but I didn't need the time to breathe, I needed an exit strategy. I found myself peering at my reflection and wondering why I wasn't capable of standing up for myself. I raced back to the table, determined to reclaim the narrative, ready to carve out a semblance of respect I thought Todd had stripped from me. I didn't know what sparked it, but I decided enough was enough. With my heart pounding, I tapped my glass to gather the attention of the room. "You can't speak to people like that and expect to be welcomed into this family," I stated, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside me. The air crackled with disbelief and silence engulfed us. Todd's eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I saw anger flicker across his face, but before he could retort, my mother intervened. "There's no need for this," she trailed off weakly, her gaze darting between Todd and me. Maybe we should just relax? It's my birthday, after all." But I could feel my resolve solidifying, a growing realization that I wasn't fighting just for myself anymore, I was fighting for my mom, too. The weight of the evening hung heavily in the air, and I finally spoke with clarity. "Hey, Todd, if you can't treat me or anyone here with respect, you should leave." Time held its breath before a stunned silence shattered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, caught off guard. My mom didn't say a word, she just looked at me, a mix of pride and concern dancing across her features, but all I could feel was an overwhelming sense of satisfaction and relief. To my surprise, Todd stood up, muttered something under his breath describing my decision as childish and immature, and stormed out. The air felt lighter in his absence, and though my mom seemed torn, I knew I had crossed a bridge that would change the contours of our family forever. The aftermath was full of raw emotions. My mom and I had long talks about what it meant to be supportive versus enabling, and while our relationship became a tapestry filled with unresolved threads, it also blossomed into something more honest. I learned that being an adult sometimes means cultivating boundaries even with the ones we love. I found my bravery in vulnerability, and it felt exhilarating. Looking back, I often wonder if I truly was the asshole for kicking him out or if he was the one posing as family. I can't say for sure, but I do know that intervening in that moment set the stage for a more authentic partnership between my mom and me, where both of us could feel safe in expressing our truths, unfiltered and free from the poison of unrealistic expectations. Months later, after the dust finally settled, I discovered my mom and I were navigating life together more openly. I realized an unexpected truth: standing up for myself meant standing up for her, too. As for Todd, he became a fleeting shadow of our past, often discussed but never missed, an echo of lessons learned in the most trying of circumstances. In the end, perhaps my query of AITA has more to do with growth than judgment, and I think we both needed that moment more than we realized. Months flowed into each other in a way that felt almost dreamlike, with each moment teaching us something profound and bittersweet about ourselves and the bonds we shared. The initial sting of uncertainty I had felt after kicking Todd out of our home faded into something softer, a gentle reminder of resilience. My relationship with my mom morphed into something I never thought possible. It was as if we had cracked open a door that had long been shut, revealing an entire room of possibilities. My mornings were no longer engulfed in tension. Waking up to a quiet house felt safe, familiar, and comforting. We developed a routine that involved long cups of coffee shared and the soft sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, mornings filled with laughter over half-baked plans for the day. Sometimes we'd simply sit in silence, and the warmth of companionship filled any gaps that words left behind. Each weekend became an opportunity for bonding. We would embark on spontaneous trips to the nearby farmer's market or spend lazy afternoons browsing through old bookstores, laughing over battered copies of novels we never intended to read but always found irresistible. We were healing together, and it became apparent that standing up to Todd had ignited a spark in both of us, encouraging vulnerability and strength in equal measure. During one particularly sunny afternoon, as we nestled into our favorite corner of the local cafe, my mom gently broached the subject of dating again, her cheeks faintly flushed with uncertainty. I felt a wave of protectiveness wash over me. Todd had left his mark on our lives, but I didn't want to let that shadow stay. She spoke of wanting companionship, the simple joys of sharing a meal with someone who wasn't mired in the complexities of past heartaches. I let her words settle within me, recognizing the importance of her desires. It was a reflection of rebirth, not only for her but for both of us. I could hear in her voice a note of hope, one that was contagious. So, I encouraged her to dip her toes back into the dating pool, enjoying the romantic rides of life instead of cowering in fear of what might come. Those discussions led to other confessions, revealing our dreams, our fears, and the haunted remnants of our shared history, including how Todd had twisted us in knots of guilt and control. However, it wasn't all perfect, of course. There were moments when uncomfortable truths reared their heads, like the time my mom had mentioned she ran into Todd at the grocery store, and my stomach had churned at the mere thought. Memories could be both heavy and light, and navigating them felt akin to walking a tightrope, balancing the urge to protect her and allowing her the freedom to forge her own path. We managed the anxiety that brewed between us with deep conversations, ensuring that our newfound bond didn't fall prey to the traditional parent-child roles of expectation but grew into something fluid and mutual instead. As time rolled on, Todd's presence became less of an open wound and more of a distant memory, salted yet healing. Discussing him now felt more like reminiscing about an old storm than grappling with its aftermath. Looking back, the confusion had morphed into clarity, the kind that made it easy to breathe again. I realized that the question of whether I was the asshole was as intricate and layered as the relationships we nurture. It had never been about placing blame but rather about making choices that resonate with the essence of who we are becoming. I pondered long and hard about how far we had come since that chaotic moment of clarity. Each step we took towards understanding ourselves was a flower blooming in the light of truth. Perhaps the most remarkable evolution was when my mom unexpectedly invited me to her first date with someone she'd met through a mutual friend. The invitation was bittersweet, a full-circle moment that mirrored all we had built together. I watched her prepare with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, carefully selecting an outfit that reflected both her newfound spirit and careful consideration. And as she left that evening, confidence in her step and an infectious smile on her face, I felt a swell of pride so potent it nearly overwhelmed me. I wasn't just standing up for her but also encouraging her to stand tall for herself. In the quiet of our home that night, I found comfort in knowing that we could support each other, no longer confined by shadows, but instead illuminated by honest growth. As I climbed into bed, I thought about that question, am I the asshole? And smiled softly to myself. We were human, we stumbled and learned, and through it all, we had found a vibrant thread of connection that knitted us together despite the chaos that tried to pull us apart. As dreams began to weave their way into my consciousness, I felt a whisper of contentment guiding me gently to sleep, surrounded by the soft glow of hope for both our futures. The days that followed felt unusually bright, a stark contrast to the cloud of unease that had loomed over our lives since Todd entered the picture. I could see it in my mom's eyes, a flicker of renewed spirit coursing through her as she began to rediscover parts of herself previously buried beneath layers of obligation and disappointment. We started sharing more, little moments turned into deep conversations, brunches turned into full-day adventures. One Saturday, we ventured to our favorite spot by the lake, a place that had been a backdrop for both cherished memories and silent tensions. As we sat by the water, the sun casting shimmering reflections across the surface, I felt a warmth growing inside my chest. Remember when we used to come here every summer? You always said the ducks could talk if you listened closely enough, I said, a playful glint in my eye. My mom laughed, a joyous sound that felt freeing. I think they've got a lot to say, she replied, especially about that Todd character. The laughter that erupted between us was like a balm, soothing wounds I hadn't realized still existed. Yet, as much as we were improving, there were moments when the past would come crashing back like waves against the shore. I would occasionally catch flashes of sorrow in her expression, remnants of guilt or perhaps loss, when she glanced at an old photograph of our family that hadn't been put away yet. One evening, while we were organizing some boxes in the attic, I found an old journal of hers, filled with entries that painted a portrait of her life before Todd, before her loneliness manifested in desperation. I delicately placed it in front of her and said, "This seems like a memory worth revisiting." She hesitated, eyes darting across the weathered pages, then opened it slowly, scanning the lines like reliving a dream. I watched the myriad of emotions wash over her face, nostalgia, longing, sadness, but ultimately an understanding. It was a journey through her past that we both needed. As the weeks turned into months, and our relationship learned to navigate uncharted waters, I still found moments of uncertainty. I sometimes wondered if kicking Todd out had been the right thing, lingering thoughts tugging at my conscience in the quiet of the night. Would I regret the choices I made? Or would that fissure have been filled with resentment had I chosen silence? When these thoughts crept in, I would remind myself, as I often did, of the strength we were building together. It wasn't just about removing a person from our lives, it was about regaining ownership of who we were and what we wanted for ourselves. In those quiet nights, as I ruminated on my feelings, I realized how much I had grown through this experience. No longer was I a bystander in my own life, but instead, I was a participant, fully engaged and aware. One crisp autumn evening, as I sat at my desk journaling, I noticed my mom standing at the hallway, hesitating as if she were unsure whether to join me or stay in her own thoughts. I looked up, and when our eyes met, I beckoned her over, encouraging without words. She shuffled over, holding a steaming cup of tea, which she offered with a gentle smile. "I've been thinking," she said, and I could hear the tremor in her voice, "about how I've let fear dictate so much of my life, how I let fear tie me to the wrong people." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "It's time to not just stand up for myself, but to keep actively moving forward. I want to try to embrace more of this life, and I want, even need, you with me on this journey." The sincerity in her words washed over me like a refreshing wave, grounding and real. We dove into an evening of plans and dreams, mapping out what our future could look like beyond the realm of past shadows. We discussed hobbies we had put aside, travels we had always dreamed of, and the importance of forging new connections, both inside and outside our family. As months slipped by, I couldn't help but remember that defining moment when everything began to shift, the pivotal decision that nudged us both out of stagnation and into a new dawn. Our bond became a tapestry woven with both laughter and tears, both the shadows of previous pain and the bright threads of hope. In this space, I found myself gently answering my lingering question every time it fluttered through my mind. Nah, I wasn't the asshole after all. I was simply a person learning how to live authentically alongside another. As I finally drifted off to sleep that night, with thoughts of future adventures suspended in my mind, I felt lighter, anchored not by guilt or fear of judgment, but by an unshakable belief in growth and connection. My dreams took flight with vivid images of laughter and sunlight, creating a canvas of what was to come, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a serene sense of anticipation unfurl within me, a sweet promise of tomorrow and all the possibilities it would bring. It's funny how something you think will be a dream come true can turn into a waking nightmare. That's how I felt the day after my wedding. My friend, Ella, was always the planner among us, organizing everything from birthday parties to community events, so when I got engaged, I couldn't imagine anyone but her by my side to help with the big day. We were close, with years of friendship behind us, so it felt natural to make her my wedding planner. She wanted to do it all pro bono, which seemed generous at the time. But the day itself? It was a beautiful blur of laughter, love, and simmering tension that crept in like mist. Everything had gone mostly according to plan, until I began noticing that her assistant, a whirlwind of energy named Jenna, was acting a little strangely. I brushed it off during the ceremony, attributing her quirky behavior to nerves. Maybe it was just the excitement of being part of a huge event that made her so jittery. However, as the night went on, I kept catching snippets of bizarre conversations and whispered comments. At one point, I overheard her loudly commenting on the decorations, suggesting they were too cheap and wouldn't even match a low-budget prom. My heart sank, My wedding was everything I dreamed of, and here was someone trashing my hard work and Ella's planning. Still, the night was joyful overall, filled with family, friends, and an overwhelming amount of love. However, my euphoria took a nosedive when I saw Jenna lurking near the bar, watching my cousin do a little dance, and behaving like she was secretly filming the moment on a phone. It felt invasive, and I couldn't shake the gut feeling that her behavior was crossing a line. I tried to brush it off, thinking perhaps I was too focused on my wedding to read too much into things, but every so often, I'd catch her tension with Ella, a look of disdain or perhaps jealousy. It was hard to tell. Some distant part of me wanted to confront her directly during the wedding, but I didn't want to ruin what was supposed to be my perfect day. As the wedding came to an end and the guests started to filter out, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. I found Ella packing up some of her things and asked her a little hesitantly about Jenna. She brushed it off with a wave, assuring me that Jenna could be a handful but was a good worker. That was the last thing I wanted to hear. In that moment, I felt torn. Should I say something? Should I tell my friend how her assistant had been acting? I didn't want to seem petty or make Ella uncomfortable. After all, this was her friend too, and I didn't want to create unnecessary tension. Yet, the idea of keeping quiet festered within me like a slowly brewing storm. I ended up keeping my mouth shut, thinking it was best to focus on my new life as a married woman, burying the worry instead of voicing it to Ella. But as days turned into weeks, I found my heart growing heavier. I replayed those moments over and over in my mind, feeling guilty for not speaking up and questioning if I had added to the problem by being complicit. Maybe Ella deserved to know what kind of person her assistant was. In the end, I opted for honesty. I called up Ella one night, still hesitant yet resolute to share my feelings. I told her everything, the comments, the looks, and how I felt a little uncomfortable with some of Jenna's actions. There was a long pause on the other end before she finally spoke. To my surprise, she thanked me for my honesty, admitting she had sensed some strange behavior from Jenna too but hadn't fully acknowledged it. Ella even mentioned that she had been having her doubts about Jenna's professionalism well before the wedding. It was a relief to hear that I wasn't imagining it after all. That heavy weight felt lighter on my shoulders. Weeks later, Jenna was let go, and while it felt sad to see Ella lose a friend over a work-related matter, it was also a sense of closure for me, an acknowledgement that I wasn't just overreacting. We spent an evening reminiscing about the wedding, laughing over the little blunders, and what could have gone differently, realizing that even with the hiccups, the day was still beautiful. It also deepened our friendship, solidifying our bond in a way I hadn't anticipated. Ella realized that honesty might sometimes sting, but it's essential in truly maintaining a friendship. As I reflect on that day now, I can't help but feel a sense of gratitude. Opening my heart to Ella not only alleviated my guilt but also helped her in the long run, protecting her from an untrustworthy colleague. And, as for Jenna? Well, perhaps she was just overwhelmed with the excitement of the day. Maybe she was having personal issues that poured into her professional life. I'll never know, and the knowledge doesn't haunt me like it once did. Update: a few months passed, and I was thrilled to find out that Ella had found another assistant, one who was not only professional but actually shared the same values as her. It feels good to see her flourish in her work while also maintaining the beautiful friendship we have. Sometimes, doing the right thing might feel heavy, but it can lead you to unexpected places of warmth and understanding, and for that, I am thankful. As I settled into my routine after that tumultuous wedding, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed not just in my life, but in the lives of those around me. Ella's new assistant brought a fresh energy to her business, vibrant and eager, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The first time I visited her office in the months following my wedding, it was as if I walked into a different world. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating tidily arranged mood boards and colorful swatches that seemed to dance with enthusiasm. Ella buzzed with excitement as she showed me new designs, her passion reignited, and I could tell this new assistant was a source of that spark. I remembered our late-night talks about the pressures of running a business while nurturing personal relationships. Ella had always been committed to both, but that balance hadn't always been easy for her. Now, she appeared genuinely happy, her laughter ringing through the room like music. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief that she had found someone who understood not just the business but also her heart. Then came the moment that rooted everything in perspective, a casual dinner with Ella, where the conversation veered from wedding planning to deeper topics of friendship, trust, and vulnerability. We chatted over steaming plates of pasta, and I couldn't resist sharing more about how I felt learning of the difficulties her former assistant faced. I didn't name names, but I told her how important it is to recognize our own limitations. Ella listened intently, nodding in agreement, and when I reflected on how my decision to not confront her about it felt like a burden lifted, a silence fell between us, contemplative and heavy with understanding. Sometimes, we have to be honest with ourselves before we can be honest with anyone else, she said, her tone soft but resolute. At that moment, it dawned on me that both of us were in a continual state of growth. Her journey in the wedding industry had paralleled mine in life. I saw in her eyes the acknowledgement of not just what she'd endured, but also the strength that refusal to judge could offer to another soul navigating their own battles. I felt grateful for the lessons learned and the bonds fortified through the trials. It felt almost magical how one challenge had united us more than ever. Even now, reflecting on that dinner, I am thankful for the open-hearted honesty we shared that evening, the kind that strengthened rather than strained a friendship. Life rolled on, and a few weeks later, I received an unexpected phone call from Ella. She excitedly shared that she had not only secured a deal with a major wedding magazine but had also been invited to speak at an upcoming bridal convention. This was the kind of exposure she had yearned for, a validation of her hard work, and I felt my heart swell with pride for her accomplishment. She asked if I could come along, to support her through what would surely be a whirlwind of networking and creativity. Of course, I said yes, and as I prepared to join her for this new adventure, I realized that sometimes opportunities arrive not just from talent but from resilience. Ella had influenced me to embrace the bumpy roads that come with life, recognizing that though our paths diverged at times, our shared experiences continued to weave us closer. The love stories we create, relationships strengthened in the wake of hardship, remind us of the beauty and vulnerability of revealing ourselves in the face of uncertainty. As I nestled into bed that night, my thoughts drifted like autumn leaves, floating softly on a gentle breeze of contentment. I was relieved to put distance between the noise of what could have festered into something unhealthy. Decisions made can weigh heavily, but those burdens oftentimes give way to understanding and growth. Gratitude filled the spaces where worry once resided, and I realized that I wouldn't change a moment of what led us here, not just for Ella or her new assistant, but for myself as well. This journey was our own, one where lessons lingered like sweet aftershocks of knowing one another's hearts, a tapestry that reminded me that at the end of the day, honest connections can indeed light the darkest of paths. As the busy season of weddings approached once again, I felt a sense of excitement ripple through me, like the gentle chime of bells heralding a season of joy. Ella and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm, often exchanging ideas over coffee, sometimes brainstorming themes for her upcoming clients, and more often than not, sharing the laughter that only friends can evoke. The experience of the past few months had instilled a deep appreciation in me, not just for Ella's talent, but for the kind of environment she cultivated, a safe space where creativity flowed freely without fear of judgment. Yet, somewhere beneath this warm connection, I felt the echoes of the past brush against my consciousness like a distant storm cloud. There was something unresolved that lingered, a loose thread that I had intentionally hoped to forget amidst all the good fortune that followed. One afternoon, as we sat across from one another in our favorite cafe, a quaint little place draped in soft sunlight, Ella shared the story of her new assistant, Mia. "You know," she started, a soft smile tinging her lips, "Mia is incredible. She brings such a fresh perspective and always shows up with these brilliant ideas." I could see the sparkle in her eyes, an unmistakable sign of her blossoming happiness, and I felt a swell of joy for her. But as she recounted the talents and quirks of her new partner, a subtle sense of guilt crept into my heart, mingling with the joy like shadows playing hide and seek. The shadow came from my own truth, the worry that I had once inhabited Ella's world with a necessary honesty, one that had felt painful yet liberating at the time. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to push the weight of my past thoughts aside, focusing instead on the laughter-filled conversations we shared. But that guilt persisted, whispering in the recesses of my mind until it became a familiar companion. One evening at home, with a quiet rain drumming softly against my window, I found myself reviewing the events of my wedding day, desperately concerned with the idea of keeping the past hidden in the shadows. Maybe Mia was exactly what Ella needed. She deserved a supportive environment, free from past tumult. My heart wrestled with the dilemma: would I be the asshole for expressing my concern as a way of protecting her? I knew I couldn't carry this weight anymore without sharing. It felt almost like a betrayal not to mention it, especially considering how open our friendship had become. The next day, during our regular meet-up, I mustered my courage and broached the subject, carefully weighing my words. "Ella, can we talk about something a little sensitive?" She paused, her smile wavering slightly, and I felt the tension stretch between us. I took a breath, viewing our friendship as a brick wall I never wished to disrupt. I need to tell you about your last assistant. What happened at my wedding? It wasn't an easy confession, the words clung to my throat like fog, but another part of me, the part that knew the weight of honesty, pushed through. Ella listened intently, her eyes widening as I recounted the moments, the way her assistant's stress had flared that particular day, how it had transferred into her actions, the anxiety it cultivated. I spoke of the raw emotions, the purported things I'd seen slip into the undercurrents of that day. I was at once terrified and relieved, her silence pressing against me as I finished my tale. Her face softened into what I interpreted as a blend of surprise and contemplative understanding. "Thank you for telling me," she finally said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing behind her eyes. I had no clue. In that moment of vulnerability, I could see the bricks of mistrust begin to crumble, not just in her eyes, but within my own heart. Ella wasn't angry, she was grateful for the truth, understanding that honesty had the power to reshape her path, just as it had for me. Days passed, and we continued our friendship, but something felt lighter. Although Ella had faced discomfort upon learning the truth, it became a catalyst for her to engage in deeper conversations with Mia, ensuring they shared the same goals and values moving forward. I watched from the sideline as she addressed the situation with grace and assertiveness, flourishing in a new cohesion with her assistant. Eventually, I learned that sometimes, sharing our burdens can cultivate deeper trust, that connection can blossom in the spaces carved by honesty. It confirmed what I'd always known: sometimes, carrying a piece of the past into the light allows it to serve as a foundation for something new, illuminating paths once cloaked in shadows. What transpired brought forth more gratitude than I could ever have anticipated, for not only had I deepened my friendship with Ella, but I had also empowered her journey, a beautiful symbiosis of care and clarity where once lay uncertainty. As I reflect back on this intricate journey we're still navigating together, I see how the vulnerabilities stitched together our stories, binding us in ways I never would have predicted. The best part of this realm of friendship was knowing we stood beside each other, carrying the lessons of yesterday into a hopeful tomorrow, knowing that at the end of the day, it is the relationships we carefully tend to that create warmth and wisdom. Perfectly illustrated in the gentle hum of our interactions and the robust tapestry of our lives woven together. It started like any other weekend in my cozy apartment, sunlight streaming in through the living room window, casting soft shadows on the walls adorned with my paintings. I'd spent most of the week in my studio, experimenting with colors and textures, lost in a world of creativity that often felt like my only refuge. Art had always been my passion, and with each brushstroke, I poured my heart into every canvas, treating each piece as a personal expression of my inner landscape. My boyfriend, Henry, often remarked how he admired my talent, but I could tell there was a part of him that didn't quite understand the depths of my connection to my work. Whenever he'd come over, he'd inevitably reach for my brush or try his hand at mixing paints, thinking this would draw us closer. I appreciated his enthusiasm, but it often felt like an intrusion. One Saturday afternoon, I was preparing to start a new canvas, envisioning a vibrant sunset that fused fiery oranges with deep purples. It was the kind of piece I desperately wanted to share with the world. As I organized my paints, Henry strolled in with a new set of acrylics he'd picked up from a nearby store. "I thought we could have some fun today," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. I felt a pang of annoyance, but instead of voicing it, I smiled and suggested we hang out first, letting him have the run of my living room with his beginner's brushes. He agreed, and we spent a while chatting, munching on snacks, and throwing paint at some scrapboards I didn't mind getting ruined. But then things took a turn. After seeing me work, Henry casually, almost haphazardly, grabbed one of my larger canvases, the one I had set aside for my sunset masterpiece, and started to cover it with a vibrant green blob. My heart sank as I froze, watching him work. "No, no, no," I whispered more to myself than to him. "That's not. You can't just," but before I could articulate my frustration, he stepped back and said, "Look at that. I made something." All I could see was the destruction of my vision, the piece I had been nurturing in my mind for days, reduced to a chaotic mess of colors that didn't belong. Bitterness seeped through my resolve, and I attempted to explain how important that canvas had been to me, but he just shrugged, a smile plastered on his face, completely unaware of my growing agitation. It felt like a betrayal, and at that moment, I couldn't find the words to convey how hurt I was. The day ended on a strained note, and after he left, I hovered over the ruined canvas, tears pooling in my eyes. I didn't even want to look at it anymore, and something inside me snapped. I rolled it up and tossed it into the trash, almost feeling an odd sense of satisfaction as I did so. But relief quickly morphed into guilt. The next day, Henry asked about it, and I could see the excitement in his eyes as he recalled that moment of impromptu collaboration. I hesitated, my throat tightening as I confessed what I had done. Henry's expression turned from amusement to astonishment. "You threw it away? Why would you do that?" I wanted to scream my frustration at him, explain how he'd ruined something precious, but instead, I felt small. "Because it was mine, Henry. And it meant something to me," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that enveloped us felt heavier than ever, and he just nodded, looking away. I expected an argument, a confrontation, but instead, we both stood in the fallout of a decision that had felt both impulsive and justified. "You didn't even care about it," he countered quietly, hurt flashing across his features, and in that moment, I realized the different ways we valued art and expression. We didn't see eye to eye, and maybe we never would. That evening, I sat alone in my studio, contemplating my actions. It wasn't just about the canvas. It was about communication, respect for one another's passions, and how quickly love could devolve into misunderstandings. I thought about the work I wanted to do, the emotions that needed to flow, and I knew I had to reach out to Henry, to explain further, to tell him how much his excitement meant but how it clashed with my creative process. As the moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating my untouched canvases, a sense of clarity washed over me. Perhaps that was the lesson in all of this, not just about art but about understanding each other as we tread through our distinct worlds. Our relationship needed open conversations, a commitment to honor each other's spaces. I texted him, asking if we could meet and talk. He replied almost instantly, saying he'd really like that. As I prepared to step into an uncertain but necessary conversation, I was left contemplating whether I was truly the a-hole in this situation, or if we were just two artists in a world that sometimes felt too confined. In the weeks that followed, we learned to navigate our differences, finding a balance between my art and his enthusiasm as we started collaborating on new projects where we could both express our creativity without stepping on one another's toes. The discarded canvas became a reminder of our journey, a testament to the struggles that could end in understanding, and in that rawness, our relationship grew stronger. Sometimes, I still wonder if I should have approached the situation differently, but maybe it was all necessary, a chapter in our story that led to deeper connections, both artistically and emotionally. As I reflect on those days, I find myself smiling at how we transformed our creative chaos into a symphony of collaboration. The discarded canvas, painted with reckless abandon and then marred by unintended destruction, eventually became more than just a victim of frustration. It morphed into a catalyst for growth. It was during one of those late nights, and we sat in our quaint little living room, filled with the smell of brush strokes and oil paint, that I realized how much we had changed. We had taken steps to infuse more understanding into our artistic practices, but more importantly, we were learning to navigate our lives together in a way that felt harmonious rather than combative. I remember the soft glow of our desk lamp casting shadows on the walls, flickering like the moments of doubt and hope that intertwined our stories. I had brought home a few canvases, each one a blank slate, eager to embrace the new chapters we were writing. We decided one evening to create a mural on the large wall in the living room, a combined testament to our growth and a reflection of our journey together. He suggested we blend abstract designs, flowing shapes that could symbolize our individual paths merging into one. The planning was half the fun, brainstorming in the late hours of the night, discussing colors, even arguing playfully about which patterns would complement the other's style. We stood shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by bursting tubes of paint and the remnants of our previous projects, as laughter filled the air with a warmth that made the room feel alive. It was in those moments I felt the cracks of our earlier misunderstandings start to heal, each stroke on our mural reflecting our innate desire to express who we were and what we had fought through, paving a road to understanding. Sure, there were still hiccups along the way, he made a few accidental spills, and I had my share of exasperated sighs, but the atmosphere remained playful and light, filled with the essence of compromise. The mural itself turned out vibrant and chaotic, with swirls of blues and greens colliding but still fitting together in a strange, beautiful way, just like us. Once completed, it became a conversation starter for our friends who came over, a visual representation of our evolution intertwined like threads in a tapestry. Even on days when I felt a shadow of doubt creeping back in, I'd look at that mural, its colors speaking unspeakable truths about our partnership, and a sense of pride would wash over me. Looking back, I see that, while the moment of throwing away the ruined canvas was driven by frustration, It was precisely what we needed to ignite not just a conversation but a whole new dialogue within our evolving relationship. It's intriguing how one little action can spiral into such immense growth, leading to a bond fortified by creativity rather than just love. Sometimes I still wonder about the piece that had been tossed away, what it could have transformed into had we taken a different route. Yet somewhere deep down, I realize that every discarded moment has its purpose, leading us to the vibrant mural on our wall, a tale of understanding that will forever remind us of the beauty found within the chaos of love and art. As the weeks melted into months, I often found myself drawn to that vibrant mural, a collage of colors swirling together in chaotic harmony. It spoke not just of our artistic journey but of our journey as a couple, reflecting every argument and every compromise we had navigated together. Each swirl represented a moment in time, a glimpse into what it meant to truly collaborate and communicate. The eventual blending of our styles created something entirely new, a unique expression that still felt like us but was also something beyond our individual selves. I'd catch myself smiling at it while washing the dishes or during evening chats on the couch, wrapped up in our shared warmth. Sometimes Jimmy would tease me about staring at our masterpiece for too long, claiming I had an obsession. I'd laugh it off, but deep down, I knew he was right. It was a part of our lives now, almost like a guardian watching over our routines. But even as we flourished, I couldn't completely shake off the shadows of that old canvas. There were nights when I would trace the outline of the mural with my fingers, feeling the layers of paint beneath my touch, and I'd remember that first piece, the potential it held and the frustration it had caused. Did I make the right call? Each time that question flitted through my mind, Jimmy would always sense my distractions. "You okay?" he'd ask, setting down his sketchbook and shifting focus onto me, his brow creased with genuine concern. His kindness washed over me like a warm tide, pulling me back from my musings, and I'd reassure him, reminding myself I had to let go of that weight. We continued to bond through our projects, but with every brushstroke we painted together, I also began to see the cracks in my own patience. I was forgiving of his exuberance, but frustration bubbled beneath the surface when he attempted to take creative liberties on my designs. It started innocently enough, a splash of unexpected color on a planned composition, but before long, he would challenge my intentions, suggesting changes that were more reflective of his style than my own, and I found that familiar tension creeping back in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm orange hues across the room, I stood before our latest piece, a work we had both poured our souls into. Jimmy joyfully suggested one more addition, a bright green streak across the center, and I felt a strange pang in my chest, a warning against complacency. "Maybe we should leave it as is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the smile slowly faded from his face. "Why? We could make it even better. We've come this far together," he countered, enthusiasm undeterred, his eyes widening with excitement. But as he painted the bold green, I stared at the disruption, feeling my heart race, bracing against what felt like an impending clash. Memories of the ruined canvas rushed back, and rather than feeling the joy of creation, I was suffocated by the fear of losing my artistic integrity again. "It feels wrong, Jimmy," I finally croaked, forcing the words through a tightening throat. His brush froze mid-stroke, and in that silence, I could almost hear the echo of every previous misunderstanding bouncing off the walls. "What do you mean wrong? I thought we were in this together." The hurt in his voice sent a shiver through me, every word punctuated with raw emotion. I hesitated, feeling the weight of my dilemma. I could either fight for my vision or consider his perspective, pondering the fragile state of our connection. In that moment, I closed my eyes and chose vulnerability. "I'm scared, okay? I mean, look at what happened last time. I don't want to lose control like that again." The walls around my heart began to crumble, and as I opened my eyes, I found him staring back at me, the light reflecting concern on his face. "I get that," he said softly, taking a step back, "but it's not about losing control. This is collaboration, and collaboration means trust. I trust your judgment, and you have to trust mine too." Looking at him, I couldn't help but wonder how this relationship had transformed, how personal this bond had become, an intimate dance between passion and compromise. It was true, I had to let go of the past. I slowly lowered my guard, and instead of shutting him down, I proposed an idea that felt both risky and liberating. What if we painted some smaller pieces together, just as a way to test our balance? If we don't like something, we can always paint over it or let it go. He blinked at me, surprised, and a slow smile crept along his face. "I like that. A fresh start, right?" And just like that, a new dialogue brewed between us. We committed to smaller projects, immersing ourselves in trial and error rather than tangible expectations, opening ourselves to failures but celebrating the little moments of creation. As we painted, the air around us thickened with laughter, music, and a newfound understanding. The mural became a backdrop for our evolving friendship, and each smaller piece that emerged without the weight of overthinking became a splash of relief amidst our artistic memories. A couple of weeks later, as we stood before a series of colorful canvases strewn across the floor, I felt a warmth flood through me upon realizing how far we had come. The shadows of doubt hadn't vanished, but they danced around the newfound light we were cultivating. I knew this journey would continue to challenge us in unexpected ways, but with every stroke, we embraced the beautiful chaos. Even as I glanced back at the mural, I smiled at our past as much as our present. Together, we were crafting art amid the uncertainties of life and love, learning not just to cope with the unknown, but to celebrate it, a vibrant tapestry of joy and growth. And with that reflection warm in my heart, I felt hopeful about what lay ahead, both creatively and relationally. We had found a rhythm woven not just through our art but through our trust, our patience, and our growing love, inching us toward vibrant futures together. The soft hum of the summer air filled my lungs as I leaned back against my old porch swing, the creaking rhythm calming me, but still the unease twisted like a vine in my stomach. I had always considered myself a peacemaker, the kind of person who would rather diffuse a tense situation than throw a match at it, but here I was, grappling with a decision that felt monumental. My best friend Jenna had been meticulously planning a family vacation for months, a week-long getaway to the coast that she'd promised would be filled with laughter, beach bonfires, and endless sunshine. However, the excitement I felt morphed into something sour when, at a recent gathering, Jenna's brother Alex introduced me to his girlfriend, Tara. From the moment we shook hands, I could tell something was off. Tara had a way of smiling that felt forced, as if she were performing for an audience rather than engaging in a genuine interaction. Still, I brushed off my instincts, telling myself I was being overly sensitive. But it didn't take long for her true demeanor to surface. During a casual conversation with a group of friends, I had made a harmless joke about how I would never be brave enough to go bungee jumping, and Tara laughed a little too loudly, before leaning in and saying, "Well, good thing you're already so grounded, there's no chance of you jumping off anything anytime soon." It was meant to be a quip, but something in her tone pierced deeper into me, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I chose to ignore it, hoping it was a one-off incident. However, the comments soon escalated into a series of passive-aggressive jabs aimed at my tastes in music and my professional aspirations, each one wrapped in a layer of mockery that left me feeling increasingly small. I knew Tara was Jenna's brother's girlfriend and that I had to play it cool for the sake of everyone else, but when the day came for the beach trip, I felt a seething ball of anxiety lodged in my throat as memories of Tara's comments replayed like a broken record. When I got the message from Jenna, confirming the details of the trip, it struck my mind like a hammer. "You excited for family time?" It read, and my heart sank. How could I possibly enjoy a week in close quarters with someone who belittled me at every turn? Thoughts raced through my head. It seemed so trivial on the surface, but I had always been taught that you should trust your gut, no matter how small the issue may seem. Should I express my concerns, tell her what her brother's girlfriend had done to me? Or would it make me seem overdramatic, an asshole ruining a family vacation? I wrestled with myself throughout the night, tossing and turning until morning brought clarity, not resolution, but clarity. I had to make a choice, either go and endure the taunts or cut my losses and cancel my reservation, which felt like a betrayal against Jenna, who had so eagerly planned this trip. As the sun rose, I decided that I wouldn't attend this trip. I thought about how I deserved to be treated better, that allowing Tara to ruin something I had looked forward to would only deepen my frustration. I sent Jenna a calm and thoughtful message, explaining my feelings and why I felt I could not join them this time around. I poured my heart into those words, conveying that it wasn't her fault, and nothing to do with the family. It was about wanting to protect my own peace. The response came quickly, and my stomach churned as I watched the three little bubbles appear and disappear, Jenna typing and erasing, typing again. Finally, her message arrived, "I'm sorry. I had no idea. Do you want to talk about it?" In that moment, a wave of relief washed over me. I had chosen the right path. We talked later that evening, and I explained my experiences with Tara. Jenna listened patiently, her understanding soothing the wounds of doubt I had bandaged throughout the day. She expressed her apologies for me feeling uncomfortable, assuring me that she would discuss it with Alex, but also emphasized that she knew how hard it was to navigate complicated relationships within families. As we talked, something began to shift in my perspective. Perhaps Jenna wouldn't harbor resentment towards my decision after all, and with that thought came a mix of gratitude and sadness. It felt liberating in a way I hadn't anticipated. We ended our conversation with a casual promise to hang out soon, just the two of us. A few days later, I received a call from Jenna. "You won't believe this," she began with a laugh. After talking to Alex about Tara, he broke up with her. Apparently, she had been treating him that way too. Her voice cracked with laughter, but it wasn't malicious. It was clear Jenna found humor in the situation and validation in my choice to step away. As I hung up, I realized that I hadn't been the asshole I had feared becoming. I had done something brave, established boundaries. Sure, not everyone would understand my decision to skip the trip, but it felt undeniably right. I couldn't help but reflect on how sometimes prioritizing your own well-being could lead to a happier outcome than you'd ever expected, and as I settled back into my swing, the summer air cradled me like an embrace, reminding me that I had made the right choice. My story echoed in the quiet of my thoughts. Speaking up was an act of self-love. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the sky, I let the stillness of the evening wrap around me like a comforting blanket. The tension from earlier in the week, those heated moments filled with uncertainty and anxiety, slowly began to dissolve into a mere backdrop of distant anxiety, allowing for introspection to take center stage. It was strange how life could shift so abruptly. One moment I was gearing up for what I thought would be a joyful family vacation with friends, and the next, I was choosing personal boundaries over chaotic gatherings that had become tinged with past grievances. I had known Sarah and her family for years. We shared countless gatherings, laughter-filled dinners, and holiday celebrations. Their home was a second family to me, yet the arrival of Jake's girlfriend, Mia, had changed the atmosphere entirely. She was charming enough to sweep her way into their circles, but beneath that veneer, I had sensed a thickness, a harshness I couldn't quite grasp until she unleashed her venomous remarks directly at me. The way she laughed, but not with me, always at my expense, fueling my insecurities to a raging fire, igniting a storm of emotions I felt powerless against. The night I confronted her, my nerves buzzed with anxiety, but a flicker of determination pushed me through. I stood up for myself, only to be met with condescension and mockery, a cacophony that echoed in the corners of my mind long after the conversation ended. The vacation had felt like an ultimatum. Either I pressured myself to endure another week of harassment disguised as humor, or I chose to walk away. But it was more than just a stressful week away. It was a reflection of a greater truth I'd been unwilling to acknowledge until now. I had convinced myself that I was hypersensitive, that maybe my reactions stemmed from personal insecurities rather than a genuine threat to my emotional well-being, but with every snide remark I recalled, I learned that my discomfort was valid. I deserved peace. Settling into my porch swing, the gentle creaking brought my mind back to the fleeting moments of boldness I'd felt when I finally said no. It felt as if a weight had lifted, and I marveled at the idea that sometimes, brave actions can spur waves of change we never expected. The afternoon breeze tangled playfully with my hair, carrying the scent of blooming flowers, and I grinned slightly, realizing that the warmth didn't just come from the setting sun but also from within my heart, a sense of freedom. I was finally free from the expectation that dictated how I should feel or act around people who did not respect me. The sun disappeared, casting the world into a soft twilight, and I settled into the stillness, letting the sounds of the night surround me. A distant thunder roll reminded me that storms could come, whether they were weather-related or within our relationships, and I realized something deeper, that it was okay to sometimes choose the calm solitude over the chaos, even if it meant stepping away from the people I loved. Before I knew it, my mind wandered to the possibility of how Sarah might react. She was the glue of our group, and I worried she would be disappointed or upset that I was skipping out. But what I knew with certainty was that I had put myself first, and for once, the discomfort of saying no transformed into the relief of being true to whom I had become. The night offered a sense of resolution, wrapping me in an almost dreamlike embrace, begging me to turn inward and reflect. I settled deeper into the swing, feeling the rhythm of life around me lull my thoughts into a soft hum. Perhaps tomorrow would bring new revelations and a deeper understanding of how to navigate relationships moving forward. As sleep beckoned, I found solace in the quiet and the decision I had made, a reminder that self-love doesn't just mean indulging in things that make you happy but also means having the courage to say enough is enough. And with that comforting thought in my mind, cradled by the feathery embrace of the summer night, I surrendered to the soft whisper of sleep. The days that followed were a gentle blur, a harmonious blend of quiet moments and the mundane rhythm of daily life. It was remarkable how, with my newfound clarity, even the simplest of routines felt more vibrant. My morning coffee tasted richer, the sunlight pouring through the window seemed warmer, and even my interactions with friends became more fulfilling. I reveled in this feeling, sinking deeper into the comfort of my own company, though a slight twinge of worry tugged at the edges of my contentment. Sure, I had been resolute in my decision to skip the family vacation, but there was a lingering thought that perhaps my friend had seen it as a betrayal rather than a necessary boundary. I could only imagine the conversations that buzzed among her family. They were close-knit, and I knew my choice wouldn't have gone unspoken. As the end of the week approached, I received a message from my friend, a simple "Hey, can we talk?" And I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. It felt as if the air had thickened, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I hesitated, finger hovering over the screen as I contemplated my next move. What could she want to discuss? Would she confront me about my decision, or would she still be understanding? I took a deep breath, recalling the peace of that summer night, reminding myself that I was not only allowed to advocate for my own well-being but that I should cherish my needs in the same way I cherished my friendships. When we finally met up at our usual cafe, the one with the checkered tablecloths that always felt homey despite how tucked away it was from the bustling main street, my heart raced. She was already seated, her brow furrowed as she fiddled with the napkin, and I felt a rush of regret wash over me at the sight of her distress. I slid into the seat across from her, searching her eyes for clues, wanting nothing more than to dissolve the tension that lined the air between us. "Hey," she started, her voice soft yet laced with unease. "I've heard some things." And just like that, I felt my heartbeat quicken. She launched into the conversation, revealing whispers of concern from her family, comments that I was being unreasonable or selfish. Deep down, I expected this kind of fallout. It was a reflection of how affectionately they all seemed to regard one another, but I also found a flicker of disappointment creeping in as she relayed their sentiments. "I just wish you could have talked it out with us, you know? I thought we were on the same team," she murmured, her eyes dim reflecting confusion. In that moment, I felt a rush of emotions surge through me, anger, guilt, and a tinge of sadness. I wanted to lash out, to explain how her brother's girlfriend's behavior had threatened my peace, that my choice wasn't born of spite but of necessity. Yet her hurt was palpable, and I could sense my need to defend myself was clashing with the urge to reassure her. "I understand how it might seem," I began slowly, choosing my words with care. "But I had to protect myself. The way she treated me, it wasn't right. I tried to reach out to you, but every time I did, it felt like there was more tension, and I truly did fear what being around her would mean for me." For a moment, silence fell between us. I watched her shoulders relax slightly as she processed my words, and although I wished desperately for a way to bridge the gap that had formed, I held my breath, hoping that understanding would find its way between us. Eventually, she lifted her gaze, and there was a soft vulnerability in her expression. "I wish you had just told me everything sooner," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "None of us are perfect, and I don't regret wanting to include you. I guess it just hurt hearing you weren't coming along. I'm always grateful for friendships," I thought as we talked, pained in the moment yet intertwined in a kind of healing I hadn't expected. While she didn't outright apologize for her family's words, nor could I expect her to, we both recognized a pathway back to each other, one paved with honesty and understanding. As we navigated through our feelings and learned how to express our vulnerability, I felt the weight begin to lift from my chest, replaced by the flicker of something warm and familiar. We spent the rest of that afternoon laughing over shared memories and even exchanging stories about our most awkward moments. By the time we parted, the tension had dissipated, and we were back on that familiar wavelength, the bond more profound for having tested its limits. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, like returning home after a long journey, and in my heart, I acknowledged that friendships, like life, would have their peaks and valleys. Weeks later, I received a postcard from their trip. There was my friend's cheerful handwriting, accompanied by a sweet note about the beach days and messy adventures, all punctuated by light-hearted illustrations. As I hung it up on my fridge, right next to the one from my own getaway, I realized the power of choice was a beacon for light in my life. It reminded me that standing up for my well-being didn't just protect me, it encouraged a space for openness and connection. The quiet comfort of being true to myself weaved itself into the friendships I cherished. In the larger narrative of my life, I learned that sometimes the ripples of a choice echo much longer than the initial impact, and the often scarier path of honesty and vulnerability not only nourishes my soul but also elevates the relationships I hold dear. I settled back into my swing one evening as summer whispered its last goodbyes, feeling eternally grateful for the lessons learned, the connections healed, and the quiet strength that grew in the acceptance of my own worth. As I closed my eyes that evening, lulled once more by the familiar sounds of dusk, I realized every step on this journey was but another beautiful stroke on the canvas of my life, colorful, wild, and utterly mine to shape. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon when my daughter, Clara, burst through the front door, her cheeks flushed from fresh air and excitement, the kind of joy only a 10-year-old could muster after a long day in school. "Dad," she exclaimed, her energy swirling around the room like a flurry of bees, "can Anna come over for dinner tonight?" On any other day, I would have jumped at the opportunity to have a friend of hers over, but that particular evening, I had a meeting scheduled that would run late, and Clara's best friend lived a good 20-minute walk away. Balancing work and family life was a constant juggling act, but this seemingly simple question ignited a flicker of guilt deep inside me, forcing me into a mental tug-of-war. "Sweetheart," I said softly, knowing I had to explain without dampening her spirits, "I have to leave for my meeting, and I can't walk Anna home after dinner like you want. I'll be back late." Clara's face fell for a moment, her bright smile wavering, but she nodded with an understanding that belied her age. "Okay, Dad," she whispered, but the disappointment hung thick in the air like a low-hanging cloud. As I prepared dinner, a simple pasta dish that Clara loved, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was letting both her and Anna down. After dinner, Clara felt it was essential to call Anna's parents to confirm she could stay for a little longer, and when the conversation shifted to how I wouldn't be able to escort Anna home, I heard muffled laughter on the other end of the line. "It's only a short walk," Anna's mom assured Clara. "She can handle it." I tried to shake off the sinking feeling in my stomach, but the weight of their reassurances felt like daggers piercing my resolve. I had never been one to shy away from responsibilities, and as the minutes trickled away before my meeting, the guilt morphed into an unsettling storm brewing inside me. What if something happened to Anna on that walk? What if I was the one responsible for that? My anxiety was heightened by the swirling chaos of parental judgment that we often hammered into each other on the schoolyard, the unspoken competition of who was doing a better job. I wondered, had I crossed a line? I genuinely believed my reasons were valid, but the idea of Clara's guilt was unbearable. I began to question whether I was, in fact, the one in the wrong. I eventually left for my meeting, doing my best to focus on the work at hand, yet the thought of Clara and her friend lingered as a whisper in my mind, reminding me of the company I was seeking to avoid. When I finally returned home, Clara was sitting on the couch, still waiting for me, while Anna had gone home, and I could not tell if Clara was sad or just simply tired. "Sorry, sweetheart," I murmured, kneeling beside her, "I know it wasn't exactly what you wanted tonight." To my surprise, she looked up at me with a smile that melted the tension away. "It's okay, Dad," she said simply, brushing it off with a wave of her tiny hand. Anna said she liked the walk. That revelation pulled me back, the bubble of relief rising in my chest. On the surface, it was evident Clara had accepted the situation, yet something deep inside me was still yearning for validation. Was I really the asshole here, or just a dad trying to balance practicalities with his daughter's happiness? I lingered on that question as I tucked Clara in that night, the moon casting a gentle glow through her window, and somehow, I realized that parenting meant navigating the gray areas where decisions could neither be categorized as purely right or wrong. A few weeks later, I stumbled upon a thread on Reddit titled "A Myth Asshole," and I curiously typed in my experience. The responses flooded in, varying from fellow parents who validated my struggle to some who accused me of negligence. As I read through the comments, a peculiar sense of community washed over me. It turned out, every parent has been faced with conflicting priorities, and perhaps, the discomfort that lingered in my chest that night was merely a reminder that parenting isn't about perfection, but rather the love and intention behind our actions. The post received a surprising amount of traction, and as I scrolled through a mix of perspectives, a gentle realization settled in my mind: there's no manual for being a parent, we all simply navigate through the darkness, hoping to find a flicker of understanding along the way. As these thoughts echoed in my mind, I savored the comforting warmth of my supportive Reddit community, reflecting on the multifaceted journey of parenthood, and there, amid virtual strangers, I found solace. It was neither the validation I had craved nor the judgment I had feared, but a realization that what mattered most wasn't if I was right, but that I cared deeply enough to question it in the first place. With that gentle realization still warming my heart, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, surrounded by the familiar chaos of my daughter's room, a tapestry of colorful drawings and dolls that had long ago discarded their pristine packaging. It was within this sanctuary of innocence and creativity that I began to understand the struggle each parent faces in their own way. I felt a pang of guilt about Rebecca, my daughter's friend, and how I had brushed off her request for a walk home. The faint echoes of their earlier laughter still lingered in the air, and I could almost hear the way the two of them had shouted secrets back and forth while playing in the backyard. It struck me then, that in my own swirling thoughts about chores and dinner, I had overlooked the little things that made my daughter feel secure and connected, and Rebecca too. I remembered how they would share dreams of future adventures while sitting on the swings, eyes bright with imagination. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with soft purples and oranges, I tried to piece together what had truly happened earlier. That day, the moment when I dismissed Rebecca's request so easily. It was a moment softened by the warmth of familiarity, that unwritten bond between parents that often feels too delicate to traverse. Perhaps I had thought it would be too much trouble, or maybe I didn't see Rebecca in the light of concern that my daughter did, an almost extension of our family, a girl who laughed a little louder with us, yet remained apart at times. The outdoors were chilly now, the air carrying a crisp scent of fall that crackled like dry leaves underfoot, and I knew I needed to make things right. Before I had time to ruminate any further, I stood up and slipped on my shoes, the soles connecting with the cool wooden floor offering a jolt of determination. I headed downstairs, fueled by purpose rather than guilt, and opened the front door into that refreshing evening chill. I could still see the faint glow of the streetlights ahead, a warm beacon against the encroaching night. Clutching my phone tightly, I called Rebecca's mother. The line beeped, echoing my uncertainty as I waited for her voice, but when she picked up, she was kind, instead of judgmental. We briefly chatted, exchanging snippets of our days, and when I mentioned how I had been contemplating the walk home I neglected, I could hear the smile in her voice when she responded. It was all so simple, yet I felt the weight of each moment we shared gonna dissolve any lingering worries. She assured me Rebecca had made it home just fine, but before we hung up, I asked if it might be all right if I walked with her to school the next day, just to ensure I was a better neighbor and a better parent. There was a brief moment of silence before Rebecca's mother chuckled. Absolutely, I think she'd love that. As I disconnected the call, the tight knot of anxiety in my chest began to untwist. It was hard to describe, that feeling of connection forming anew in this little community encapsulated by the comfort of nightly routines and the soft glow of streetlights. I found myself wandering through the evening, letting my mind linger on small hopes that seemed very large, as I mulled over the power of small gestures and the simple, intricate dance of friendships. Children, I realized, see everything in black and white, navigating their worlds in vivid colors of love and care, and perhaps it was that innocence I had taken for granted. By the time I returned home, the stars were scattered like tiny lanterns across the sky, and every worry I had momentarily faded into the backdrop of an evening gone to slumber. As I nestled into bed that night, something shifted within me, as if I had shed a layer of my past self. Even in my mistakes, the willingness to act, to reach out, to bridge distances however small, became a quiet fortification around my heart. After all, being a parent isn't about perfection but is rooted in connection and those very moments when we recognize our missteps and find ways to grow. And so, with a grateful heart and a serene mind, I drifted off into a deep sleep, knowing tomorrow would hold new possibilities, both for me and for Rebecca, entwined in this dance of discovery we call growing up. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtain, casting soft patterns across my bedroom walls and nudging me awake. The remnants of last night's insights lingered in my mind like a gentle whisper, reminding me of the intricacies of parenting and the lessons tucked within every moment. I rose from my bed feeling lighter, ready to nurture not just my daughter, but also the evolving bond I shared with her friend, Leah. As I maneuvered through our cozy kitchen, its walls adorned with family photographs chronicling our collective laughter and tears, I heard the familiar patter of small feet along the hallway. Rebecca appeared, her hair a tousled halo and her eyes still heavy with sleep, but brimming with the exuberance of a new day. "Can Leah come over today?" she asked, a spark of enthusiasm illuminating her face. My heart warmed at the sight of her unfiltered joy, and I nodded, already imagining the giggles and games that would fill our living room. But a pang of worry threaded through my thoughts. Would Leah feel welcome? Would she, too, share that flicker of childhood glee? With a determined spirit, I set about preparing for their day together. A fresh pot of cocoa brewing, I arranged some snacks, goldfish crackers shaped like tiny fish and vibrant fruits that glistened in the morning light. I left the door open, listening to the sweet sounds of Rebecca making elaborate plans for their imaginary adventures. Over the next few hours, laughter erupted from the living room, a melody that transformed the mundane into a symphony of friendship. I occasionally peeked in, witnessing a tapestry of imaginative play unfold before my eyes, two young friends engaged in a world they created, a nexus of creativity that blossomed in joyous bursts. But as the clock ticked towards lunchtime, I noticed a fleeting shadow cross Leah's face, a furrow of uncertainty that contradicted her laughter. It tugged at my heart, the instinctive urge to protect my daughter from any hurtful situations. I approached them gently, inviting Leah to help me with preparing lunch, hoping to create space for our budding connection. She hesitated but eventually followed me into the kitchen, her fingers gently twirling a lock of hair, an involuntary gesture that revealed her unease. "You're really good at making art, Leah," I said, trying to bridge the gap with warmth. "I saw some of your drawings the other day. How do you come up with those ideas?" Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise igniting amid the softness of her vulnerability. For a moment, she hesitated before venturing, "I just think about what makes me happy." Encouraged by her response, I nudged the conversation further, weaving in my own experiences with art, how it had helped me find joy during tough times. As we chatted, I noticed her shoulders relax, the tension ebbing away with each exchange. By the time we returned to Rebecca, there was a subtle shift in the air. Leah's laughter rang clearer, buoyed by the sense of acceptance that filled our home. After lunch, the three of us sprawled on the floor with markers, paper, and sticky notes. I watched as Leah shared her ideas with Rebecca, who infused them with her own silly antics. They embarked on a frenzy of creativity, and soon the dining room transformed into an explosion of colors, the lyrics from their favorite songs floating through the air as they danced amid their imaginings. It was in those moments, those delicate and unscripted memories, layered with laughter and imaginative play, that I felt the morning's wisdom coalesce within me. I felt grateful for the opportunity to step beyond my own discomfort. After Leah's mother arrived later in the day to retrieve her, I found myself yearning for a way to continue fostering their connection, knowing it wasn't just about me learning to navigate the complexities of relationships, it was about Rebecca growing into someone who could embrace and understand her friends' emotions, too. I felt that night, as darkness settled gently over our neighborhood, that my heart grew alongside the girls' beautiful friendship. I reflected on the valuable lesson Leah had unknowingly imparted, about how even in our uncertainties, our willingness to listen and create connections formed an unbreakable bond that made us all just a little less alone in this vast world. Resting my head on the pillow, I closed my eyes and anticipated tomorrow's adventures, each day a new page in our story, a story I had the privilege, chaos included, to help shape alongside my daughter and her friends. As sleep enveloped me once more, I found peace knowing we were all just navigating this world together, a circle of support hand in hand as we explored the worth of every little moment, including those imperfect ones where our hearts expanded just a bit more.